1, 2, 3. This is recording to the cloud up there, the cloud. And the cloud lets us save these excellent presentations for another day. Maybe next year when I teach this class, I'll say, you should watch Lauren's presentation. It is fabulous. And not only that, Tian came, and then Byron came, and then Faye came, and they'll all watch it and do reflection papers on it next year and the year after. It's not just for today. This is going to be saved, and we'll make a playlist from the guests in this class, like I like to do. I make a little course playlist at the end. So if you've forgotten what they said or what they look like, or tips that they gave you on how to apply for a job or all that stuff, and they're at Old Dominion where Tian is, they've had job openings. Where Byron is, they've at West Florida, they've had lots of things, and also where Lauren, tons of UNT, North Texas, they always got jobs, always. And they have new department chairs, a good friend of mine, and a couple of new faculty down there who are friends of mine. So in fact, I gave a talk on diversity, equity, and inclusion back in February for North Texas. And at the end, they said, we have a department chair position open. Would you like to apply for that? Please, please. And I said, no, I'll just stay where I am for now. But I was tempted. North Texas is a nice place, really is a hotbed for the educational technology world, or learning, design, and technology, as they call it today. We're in the midst of a sea change in terms of the importance of this field, not only locally, not only nationally, but to the world community. Not only because of COVID, not only because of online learning, but because of all the other technology trends I went through last week, whether it's immersive worlds, or it is gamification of learning, or it is wireless and mobile technologies. There's just a plethora of possibilities that this field is researching. And the amount of research that came out during the pandemic probably related, at least related to online learning, distance learning, open education, and all that, probably in the 4 years since COVID, more research has been published in these areas than in the 100 previous years, okay? And to keep track of that, to understand that, it takes either a lot of reading, or you can do what a lot of people did here, is reading systematic reviews of the research, reading meta-analyses, reading scoping reviews. So Vanessa Denon and I, Vanessa from Florida State, she's a former student of mine, and she'll be a guest next week in this class. And Florence Martin, now at North Carolina State University, she was at UNC Charlotte. The three of us have done 2 special issues, and you read one for the last week, the same one for this week, and next week you read the second one, which are systematic reviews of the research on emerging technologies for the last couple of weeks, and next week on e-learning, online learning kinds of things. And we'll bring in a couple of people there to talk about that. So the 4 people tonight have one of the articles, and I don't have my special issue up here. It's downstairs in my home office. I'm upstairs in the upper office. Does anyone have the special issue with them? Because I've sent this to all of you. If you've got it handy, you could hold it up. It would be Byron would have it, possibly. Do you have it right behind you, Byron, or is that at work back at?
I've got it at home. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're at work now. Yes. You guys got nice offices there at West Florida in Pensacola. Wood, is it wooden floors and all that?
No, I wish.
Lauren, did I send one down to you, a copy?
You did, and I'm pretty sure I put it on display in my office. I decided to move in also there on campus. So it's not in my home office actually looks like a coffee lounge. So I try to keep the publications and such in my other office, and this is my workspace.
Well, in the slides I brought tonight, there's a picture of it anyways in there. If we get to my slides, we'll probably go to Lauren's slides to start with. My point is that it's hard to keep up, and the research you'll read for last week, this week, and next week and all this whole semester, this is all special issues, right? But in particular, the first 3 weeks are special issues, which are overviews of the research. They're summaries of the research. What they sometimes call systematic reviews of the research, or scoping reviews, or meta-analyses. They have different intents, different focuses, but the thrust of them is that we try to understand the overview, the get the epitome of what's been going on in all these various areas of learning without having to read every single article. And that's why we'll start with Lauren talking about what young people are doing or learning with the use of mobile technologies in particular, and digital literacy skills maybe, and so forth. And then we will move on to Tien, and then Byron, and then Faye will go. Faye will talk about social media. Byron will talk about wearable technologies. And Tien, I forgot now. Tien?
I think I'm talking about social media.
Social
and
media
Faye
too,
is talking about gamification. I could be wrong.
Yeah. Both of you guys are in the social media space. In fact, Vanessa's articles in social media
Right.
as well, which I'll summarize. So we have a lot of social media pieces in the special issue, a lot of gaming issue. Faye might be gaming. So comments or questions before we get rolling here in R678 Emerging Learning Technologies, week 2 in the spring of 2024. This is a class I started, as I said last week, back in 1990, when I was 8 years old and you guys weren't even born yet. And Dr. Mike Reed and I attended, as I said last week, an institute for AERA, an AI institute in San Diego in the summer of 1990. And we decided to create a class based on that. Now, Chris Dede is my podcast partner 30 some years later. So the world works in mysterious ways. Lauren, you want to call up your slides, or do I have to make you a co-host?
I can share my screen.
Okay, sounds good. And do I need to introduce anyone a little more? We'll do it one at a time. So before Lauren presents, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're focused on before you get to your slides? So don't even call up the slides. Why don't you just chat a little bit?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be surrounded by scholars and future scholars and younger scholars, and just all of you in this room and those that watch this in the future. A little background: I am a education teacher, an educational researcher, curriculum designer, instructional designer, lover of and judger of ed tech. In that regard. So my biggest reason why I left the K-6 classroom after 6 years, after working in multiple contexts like behavioral hospitals, EL contexts, was I was frustrated by the overabundance or underabundance, depending on how you look at it, of technology being thrown around by the district with little regard for how to actually integrate it into my instruction. And I was helping a lot of teachers and just feeling like I could do more if I went to get a PhD. So in 2013, I left for University of Florida. I got my PhD. I worked under Pasha Antonenko, and I graduated with an ed tech and reading focus. And so my research is technology adoption in literacy contexts, and I use a lot of inquiry and reflection to help my teachers understand the adoption process and the use process and get over those stages of vulnerability that lies behind so many new things that we do. And I basically just want technology to be used in better ways than it is now, but not a tech babysitter, but to make our lives more efficient, to make learning better. And so this study was born out of this long time sort of, I guess you can call inquiry comes from frustration, what we want to make better and improve practice. So it comes out of this desire to know more about how does this mobile technology impact literacy learning. So I contextualize that in the pre-K through 5 classroom, because those are where my experiences have been. And that's where my expertise lies. And so with that.
Before you call up your slides,
yeah.
let me just say that I've been running for 1,398 days in a row. And this summer I was in Dallas running. It was the hottest anywhere I've been. I almost died after 10 steps. Your old department chair, you and Joanne, met me for lunch that day and rehydrated my system with refreshments. But Lauren, could you give me a high five? To both high fives, put both your hands up there and give me a high five. Very good. Because Lauren went to Florida. My first speech in Florida during my 2013, when she started, 2014 sabbatical, was in Florida. University of Florida had me come down there. And I just wanted to make sure that both she has both arms because there's gators down there. They call it Florida gator. I didn't know if one of them bit your hand or not, but I just want to make sure you had fingers left. So it's one of the top schools in educational technology, and so is University of North Texas. Florida's probably got the most people and has the most money of any, more than IU, more than Purdue, more than Georgia, more than Florida State. University of Florida has more money, more opportunities for technology and education than anyone, because the state of Florida made it the flagship campus for everything. So they got a ton of money. University of North Texas has also gotten a ton of money from the state of Texas recently as well for a big endowment. I'm keeping track of this. So I'm sorry, Laura, I just had to throw that in there. You've been at some good places, and you're joining us in Indiana, which is a good place too. Why don't you go ahead and call up your slides, and everyone will present for 10 to 15 minutes, then we can ask some questions, and we'll rotate through everyone. So
thank you. And I will call up, and then I will have to turn my camera off for a little bit because I have to chase some children. But one of them actually came, a 2-year-old walked in here while I was talking, but you probably didn't even notice. So things that we've learned to cope with since the pandemic. So I appreciate just the opportunity to be here. And yes, I have been very fortunate to find really good people in the field, and I'm amongst them now. So I'm going to share with you, now that you know my background, a little bit about what inspired me and motivated me. And yeah, don't mind the 78 tabs that I have open because I actually closed a bunch prior to starting this meeting. So I'm pretty proud of myself. And that's just one of the browsers. So here we are, and we're looking at, this is I took a picture of it. So you were asking if you had the issue. I have the screenshot of it. So this is my particular input to the special issue that Kurt and Vanessa and others contributed to, that they started. And this is the influence of mobile technologies on preschool and elementary children's literacy achievement, a systematic review spanning 2007 to 2019. So again, special issue call, I read it and I was like, this is right in my wheelhouse. I wonder if they're going to like it, because ed tech and literacy have kind of had some contentious moments in the history that I've been working in it, because digital technology is so new to that field. But I went for it, and here I am. So, and it was honestly the most fulfilling project I've ever worked on. Very much, a lot of work, but sometimes we put in the most effort when we're the most interested. So what's the problem? We have an increasing adoptive use of mobile technologies in our classrooms, obviously, right? We have Chromebooks, we have tablets, we have iPads, whatever the case. We didn't have, smartphones until 2007, iPads till 2010. The uptick in the adoption has been enormous for most schools, and even since the pandemic, even more. And so, but the problem is we don't really know if they're impactful and in what ways, positively, negatively, or mixed. So that was one of the research questions. And looking at, the apps or the software. Is it the app? Is it the software? What other variables? And so looking at this from a literacy context. So from my teacher's perspective of thinking, are my students actually learning from this tool and this device? We put together a systematic review measuring the impact, which means we measured it quantitatively. So we didn't want to look at qualitative studies. Those are very valuable. I'm more of a mixed method person anyhow, but we wanted to look at where studies reported, ANOVAs and t-tests and quantitative findings, so that we could really get at how is it impacting writing? How is it impacting the 5 other skills within reading, which are usually defined within the realm of comprehension, fluency, phonics, phonemic awareness. I wrote Phoenix. I lived there for a while. I'm pretty sure my computer auto-corrected that, sorry. And vocabulary. And again, the context was pre-K through 5, because that's where I have my expertise in. And we spanned it from 2007 to 19, because at the time this issue was being published in 2020. So this was really fresh research, and we started in 2007 because that was the first year that smartphones were adopted. But as you know, it takes typically a year to 3 or more to get a paper published. But we didn't want to exclude those studies in case there were some. So for our search strategy, all of the top is our databases that we explored. We actually returned 2,337 abstracts that we screened manually, not with AI. It was us. And doing so, we ended up with 61 articles included in our study based on our inclusion criteria, which is all in the paper. So, sorry, it jumped over me. It's probably the internet. So we're just unfreezing today after a 4-day freeze and snow in North Texas. Yes. So where the studies were conducted, this will come up again, but primarily, as you can see, just as a quick image, primarily in the United States. It's not that surprising, I suppose, considering when you think about access to technology and things like that. Also, I was looking for studies in English, so that'll also impact it. So this goes against everything I stand for in terms of putting too much on a slide, but I had to. So it's what it is. So you might want to drag the participant view or something to another place. But for the findings, I didn't want to skip over this because this is really the meat. We looked at the theoretical framework that were used in the studies. Only more than a third included a theoretical framework, so they're not guiding their research or their design with theory, which was quite frightening. Mobile devices, most of them named the type of the mobile device, and the tablets were most common. The learning app characteristics, about half of them were commercial and a small portion were researcher created. I don't give you all the stats, but it's all in the paper. I just try to point into the most apparent ones. And then for reported outcomes, you know, primarily 60% of them reported gains. Some of them were mixed, about 15%, and then there were some that had no gains, admittedly. And you know, it's interesting because as a researcher, you're like, I really feel like I need to have some good findings. Well, sometimes no gains is a really good finding because it's important to know what didn't work and maybe why. And still, again, run the study again in a different context because it could be different. iPads were the most commonly identified device in the mixed results. I thought that was just an interesting thing to put in there. And maybe it's because there's so many ways to use them. The achievement measure was researcher designed primarily and some commercial. I think that's interesting that 60% of the impact studies are researcher designed. It makes you question trustworthiness and reliability as a researcher. So for the context of the countries, there were primarily in the United States, then after that was Taiwan and then Turkey. So, but we were looking at English only studies because that was one of our parameters. And then the sample size, according to Slavin and Smith, you can see what those mean, but 50 of them, so about 75% of the studies were small, about 12% were medium or so, and about 6 or 7% were considered large. So only 4 studies were really large. And I'm going to come back to that because the sample size really impacts power, which impacts the reliability, which impacts everything, right? The broader impacts. So learner type, only half described specific participant characteristics. So of those 61 studies, only 30 described their learners. And I think that's a huge concern. And when they did describe their learners, of those who did, they described them in terms of their socioeconomic status, their remedial reading skills, whether they had them, and they were also whether they were English learners. So again, sort of troubling in that regard. The world has definitely changed a lot since 2019 with participant characteristics and descriptions and being more transparent. But and then the usage characteristic. So about 60% of the studies took place in the classroom. So that means inclusively in the teacher's classroom. About a third of them were pull-out intervention. Some of them described that as being like in the hallway, which if you've been in a school or you've supported in a school, sometimes that's all the only place you can be. But if you think about it from the perspective of teaching in a hallway and how reliable that is and how effective that is, that's another variable. And some did not specify, and one was in a gifted talented club. And then the last biggest part of the findings, before I talk about the ahas, is that of the studies, about a third were pre-K, which I thought was pretty high actually. And then because those tend to be in medical journals, a lot of the pre-K work that I research. And about 15% were 4th grade, 15% were also in 2nd grade. They were pretty dispersed after that, same as 3rd. And then 6 of the studies described them as elementary aged. So we could probably be a little more specific there. And in terms of the journal type, a lot of them were published in Tech Trends, actually, which is an AECT journal. They were primarily educational technology with some in gen ed and exceptional populations, some in educational psychology, and an equal number in literacy and early childhood. So less in the literacy context, but as a personal scholar who recently achieved tenure, I think 2 years ago, I can tell you that more of the ed tech journals are open to ed tech and literacy versus literacy journals open to ed tech and literacy, just from my own personal experience, case study of one. So, and then the year published, there were none between 2007 and 2010, probably because it takes a long time to design a study, implement, and then write it up and get it published. And those were when mobile devices were just coming out. And that met our parameters, of course, too. And then, so if you notice between the 5 years after that, we have almost half. And then from the last 3 years of our context, we have even more so than that. So because it says 44%, but it's less of a time frame. It's a smaller time frame. So what are some of the key takeaways? These studies were and even though they were in high quality journals, a lot of them still needed better research design. So we need to be more transparent as researchers in collecting the data, and B, distributing and disseminating and describing those participant characteristics, whether it's really applicable to other contexts, because working with a gifted, talented program is going to vary depending on working with an EL population in, say, where I used to work in Phoenix. Also, what are standardized achievement measures? If I'm making my own test, how am I actually ensuring that it's reliable? Or, how am I creating those things, and what is a reliable test? So making sure that those are, generally accepted principles in practice. We need larger data sets, only 4 of 61, four on one hand, we're large, over 250. And the data's there. We just don't have access to it primarily. The schools have iReady, they have iStation, they're implementing these programs, but who's reading the results and who's learning from them? Who's doing the ongoing progress monitoring are the teachers, right? And the administrators are adopting it so that they can predict whether these students will pass the test in their schools. But beyond that, do they have external researchers? Are they partnering with other experts in the field? And are teachers a part of this too? And I think that's an important question we should be asking. So we really need to broaden that and broaden access and broaden how we are using these tools, because my dissertation, for example, found that we use these tools to force students to use technology. Why do kids learn to read in the home? Social influence was the biggest finding in using the Utah framework, Unified Theory of Acceptance and Use of Technology, and then attitude. So we force students to use it, and then they have a positive attitude toward it. They become addicted to the technology, and it just perpetuates. And so that is, in a nutshell, what drives me in my research. So we need more research on the app and software usage. I don't know of a pre-service teacher that I talk to that has access to iStation or iReady. It's privy to the teachers and their students. How are we going to improve this if there's a barrier between those spaces? So it varies a lot. And that's why some researchers do their own creation, which is wonderful, but we need to bring those to the masses.
This is a great example of taking research and thinking about practice and how it's impacting the world of K-12 education.
I honestly, and I didn't know as a teacher when I taught for 6 years, it wasn't until my dissertation research that I was like, why are we using Study Island? Why are we using iStation? And the assistant principal said, well, the district gave us 3 choices, and this is what we have to do to choose to predict whether our students are going to pass the state test.
It's all for the state test, isn't it?
It's all about assessment and predicting success. But what is success? I designed all of my curriculum when I taught my first 3 years, and I had no idea what a blessing that was. And then now, having been in schools, 3 more schools after that, and having actually one of my schools, my behavioral hospital, I also designed curriculum, but it's still, we're feeding them everything and they're not questioning what they're doing, maybe because they can't, but finding that ability to have that voice is really important, and making that known.
Well, before you go through these, what's next? Do we have any questions from anyone here?
I know, sorry, I fed you a lot. It was a big study.
Questions from anybody who's attending tonight? Or comments?
I have a question for the presenter. So I think that this research is really meaningful, and I'm curious about the theoretical framework guiding this research. Can you elaborate more? Thank you.
Yes. So we use the five prong approach to reading, which is comprehension, phonics, phonemic awareness, fluency, and vocabulary. It's like the 5 pillars of reading instruction, and writing, because we were focusing on literacy. Only less than a handful of studies actually focused on writing, by the way. So there's a huge paucity of that. Maybe things like Quill will change that. But we wanted to guide the framework with the ways in which people think about reading. So those 5 pillars, and then because it's literacy, we added in this component of writing. So I went to what do I teach my pre-service teachers, sort of as my own theory. I traditionally would go to sociocultural and constructivism and other types of things in my other types of research, but this was very contextually different because it was focused on content.
So Alicia teaches in Shanghai. She's the English professor and she's my visiting scholar. Thank you, Alicia. Anyone else?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much for this talk. I was curious, in your article, you talked a lot of, or you mentioned the impact of novelty and how with it can be hard sometimes to determine whether something is successful because it's just new and exciting. And I was wondering how, if you've given thought to how to sort of correct for that in studies, or what ways to like, especially just in the variety of different ed tech studies out there, how to factor in the novelty factor.
That is a
Thanks.
wonderful question, and something I think about all the time. As a reviewer, I find myself saying, well, this is a great study. It could be better. And I can't say that I will accept it necessarily, because a 2-week intervention is not enough to show impact. So depending on what the study's question is asking, right? I think about these things all the time. And so with that in mind, it's important to think about long-term longitudinal effects year over year. I did a recent study in teaching and teacher education that measured the impacts of using a service learning experience combined with a digital portfolio, working with students in a literacy setting, ESD after school program. And I found that it actually did impact their GPA, and compared to the other College of Education students, we matched like to 550 or so other students. And that was over a couple of years. And so I think when we're using these digital innovative approaches combined with balance of life and reading, it actually that's when things can change. So, but when we're designing studies that are quick hits, that's a problem. But the other issue that we face is most of the people that are doing this work are on a tenure track, and the biggest thing that they have against them is time. And so while I would love all of my studies to be longitudinal in some regards, the ones that are appropriate for it, you can't do that. So we need more of it, yes, but on the other hand, it's really going to depend on who's doing the work and how it's being situated. But yes, I can't go into a classroom and teach a science lesson with VR, virtual reality, and say it was impactful. I was doing a semester-long study during COVID that got interrupted, and they never came back to take their post-test. So we're getting there. I'm actually redoing that again this semester. But so really great question, complex situation. We need more longitudinal studies. We need to get access to that big data within the districts so that we can measure that year over year, and not just that against the state scores and try to put together and piece together of the puzzle which it's not going to work that way, because they're different measures.
Great, thank you so much.
And Anna has a question for you, and it might be the last one before we have you do the summary, and then we'll move on to Tian, but we'll see if there's another one. Anna, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Lauren, on your point 3 here on the slide, this is maybe sort of a side point, but I was interested, said that the collaboration among those groups was so important. And I was wondering if you saw in your studies any good examples of collaboration with ed tech researchers and the software creators and the teachers. And if not, what do you think is preventing that?
That's a good question, Anna. So first thought is there really good collaboration between all of these spaces in these research contexts. From what I remember, no. But what I'm going to tell you is reading through my paper again, which I did today, I'm like, oh my goodness, this was such a thick study. It was huge. We asked a ton of questions. We analyzed a lot of data. I worked my colleagues to the bone, myself included. And I'm saying to myself, gosh, how did I do this? So from what I remember, no.
We're all laughing with you because we're, the TN's laughing, Byron's laughing. We all in the same boat. We do the same. Yeah. How do I do this?
I mean, because you just get so locked in when you find something that you like. But I don't remember that, and I don't recall that. And this seems to be a theme this year for me. I just wrote a self-study on using VR in the last decade with a colleague, and it was eye-opening because you have hardware and software, and they're all in different places, and none of them are coming together to help education. And so that was kind of that's my whole paper, right? But so to your point, though, this is exactly what we're missing from here, because, and we say this in politics too, like these people aren't teachers. How do they know? They don't know what it's like in ground zero, and they haven't been there. They're not talking to the teachers. So it's the same thing here, different chapters, same book. And it's really hard because the teachers know best, but then so do the ed tech researchers and the computer scientists alike, to design, to help implement, to help create and carve out the future. So
Thank you.
So Risa has a question in the chat, and I if it's not a quick answer, just say no. Risa, you want to go ahead and ask what's in the chat?
I see it.
Hello.
Hello,
Hello,
Risa.
Lauren. Thank you very much. When you are talking about mobile, tablet, or whatever, and you claim that these devices, they had positive effect on the fluency, comprehension of the students, the thing that comes to my mind is that, do you use any specific app, any specific interface for improving the fluency of the students, or not? I'm very curious to see the interface. I wish you could show us the interface, or maybe the app that you use.
Good question, Risa. So this study looks at what other people have researched, because it's a systematic review. I wanted to know how other scholars have used and applied different apps and different software. So I think it's figure 2 in my paper, and I could pull it up for you, but it's really big and really long. It's a colorful, big, long table, and it has each app in there that we investigated, and whether or not it was free, and whether it was researcher designed or not, and also which domain of reading, back to our earlier question from Alicia, which domain was implemented and which domain it impacted. So like Duolingo was comprehension, and it was vocabulary and writing. And so that was one of the ones that they used. Some people used Facebook to make groups to work on writing. So there's a lot of different apps, and some of them were commercially designed, some of them were researcher designed. So there's a huge list of those in the paper, and I'm happy to send you a copy of it if you would like to see it. I'm sure, I don't know how your students and anyone access the paper, but I can send you, I have an author copy too.
Okay. Since my little son is a 3rd grader, I'm just familiar with Prodigy. I guess it's for mathematics. I'm not familiar with anything else. Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's a great question. And that would be great for a math study. That's going to come up in a math systematic review.
Right.
Yes.
So
thank you.
Everyone has all the articles of every week. They're available to them. I've made them available. And I could resend them, but they all have them, so they should take a look at the tables in yours. Why don't you quickly summarize a couple things from the future directions, not the whole thing, but pick out a couple for us?
Yeah, so just a couple food for thoughts because this came out a couple of years ago. But you know, how would this study be different now post-pandemic? You know, we've had, like you said, a lot more research since then. So how could this be different maybe in looking at another 5 years since then, at the end of this year? And what is the impact of generative AI on literacy and literacy learning? I mentioned Quill. Quill.org is one that's becoming popular among us, at least in the ed tech field, and the potential for it to improve and change writing. I mean, we also know GPT and the generative AI that can do to shape or change or modify writing, and how do we know what we're reading is written by a human and how much of it was written by a human. So those types of things are something that we need to consider. And I don't think we're ready for looking at the difference between the software versus the hardware and impact on literacy, especially because there's not enough research that has looked at that, but something to think about and maybe continue down with more research in that area. Maybe that would be a good special issue call for software and hardware. And then a scoping review and then a systematic review. And we talked about this, but just really improving the study design and improving hardware and software and collaborations in the field.
So Jill Wong, who's another visiting scholar from Taiwan, her ears perked up when she saw the numbers with Taiwan. Jill, you want to read your comment before we move on to Tian?
Okay, I would like to thank Lauren because I totally agree what you said about the need of longitudinal studies, because I think let's say it's some kind of study to help us to examine the long-term impact, because sometimes when after I browse all the studies on educational technologies, I think they are more like product reviews. Because all kinds of softwares, all kinds of self-developed products. Yeah, and also I think more methods should be employed to probably examine different perspectives of learning instead of only measuring the effectiveness.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. And there's just there's so many layers there that we can explore a little bit better.
We should clap for Lauren here tonight, everyone. You can stop sharing your screen, I guess, so you can see us all clapping for you. It's great to have you with us here. Maybe you can stay for Tian's in case anything comes up. Maybe the next one before you have to run off and get the kid, whenever you have to leave for getting the kids, but maybe hang around for a few minutes. I want to thank you, not only thank you, but maybe you can share your slides with me.
Oh, absolutely. I will drop the link in the chat for you all, and then you have it on your email as well, so you can share with your students as well. Feel free to put it online. That's fine. Anything. I want to get the research out there and I want to help the community. And when I say collaborate, I also mean myself. So, you know, I'm here for everyone, and thank you for having me, and I will stick around and listen as well.
So you have to believe in the power of sharing. I built 8 share sites, so we want you to share, but we don't want you to share your snow. We got enough up here. Before we go to Tian, I just want to have a brief introduction here to the special issue, if I can find it in all the windows I have open like you do. Come on, there we go. So if you see on the screen there, Vanessa Denon, who did the special issue with me, is on the right. She's at Florida State. Florence Martin is sitting next to me. She's at North Carolina State. Lin is at UNT, was at UNT, now she's at Southern Methodist University. She was a faculty with you, a colleague there, and she asked us to do the special issue because she's an editor of ETR&D. So we did the special issue, about 13 pieces or something like that in there. That's the cover of the special issue. It's really thick. I bought 100 copies. Springer wanted to sell them to me for $200 a copy. I got AECT to get a deal, and I got them for $15 a copy. Somehow they had a discount, big discount, but I'm out. I only have my own personal copy left. Unfortunately, I can't share them, but we signed, the Vanessa and Florence and I signed all the copies, I believe, and we've sent those up. We were asked then to speak at ACT. So Byron, Faye, Tian, and myself, and Vanessa and Florence. But Lauren wasn't with us on that one. I apologize, Lauren. But the slides I've saved from the panel that we did during COVID. We did a virtual panel on the special issue. And we can only get so many in 1 hour. As you can see, we're going to have trouble getting all these in. But in the special issue, we had 13 reviewers, mostly IST alums. We started in August. Well, we got the proposals August of 2019. By August 2020, it was published, the whole thing. So we got done within a little over a year. Not, and we were a few months ahead of schedule. We had 48 submissions, 13 accepted. We also we had Tom Reeves and Lin Lin write the ending or closing. David Wiley, who's an expert in open ed, and myself wrote the preface, and then we wrote an introduction summarizing the entire issue. So it was a big, we actually had a session the year before in Kansas City, ACT is this coming fall. We had a presidential session on systematic reviews of the research, and then Lin Lin chaired the session. She said, you guys should do a special issue on this. That's what kind of happened. We started with a conference paper, a presentation, a panel, and it turned into a special issue, just as a background. That's why you want to do those kinds of things. After Byron, after Tien, after Faye, I'll summarize Vanessa's study briefly. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. On social media, teenagers in a school context, a scoping review. Vanessa and maybe Heijin Cho, who's now at Bowling Green University, Vanessa will be, Heijin might be next week, and Mena Ju will be a guest next week because we did a second special issue where they're in. I'll summarize this one because I was involved in this one, the summary of MOOC's research. So I'll definitely summarize after Faye goes. And then we have Florence Martin's study coming up here. Where is it? On adaptive learning. And so I'll summarize hers as well. So I'll have those three. I'll briefly kind of summarize what those three studies entailed, but we want to move to Tien. So Tien, I didn't change any of your slides. I hope that's okay. Or if you changed them yourself and you would rather present your slides, let me know. Tien, are you with us?
Yes. Yeah, I think you can just go with yours.
Okay.
I didn't really make much changes at all. I thought you were going to use yours, so
Okay, great.
I didn't really make any updated copy.
Yeah, anything so far that we've mentioned that maybe we forgot about, or anything you want to add to the points that Lauren or I have made?
Yeah, you mean like with this topic specifically, or?
About the whole doing a special issue, about being involved in a special issue, and why people do scoping reviews and systematic reviews and meta-analyses and all that.
Yeah, I love writing systematic reviews, and I think especially with like doctoral students, it's such a great way for them to get an overview of a specific pocket of research that they're really interested in. So I always recommend the students doing systematic reviews, and I also have a class where I introduce students to specific ways, like just kind of coaching them the kind of using the Prisma or other type of references out there to have them become familiar with the process of conducting systematic reviews. So they become at least familiar with the process, and then have a little bit of practice in their own class. And then ultimately some of those actually become publications. So
let me add that maybe one or both of them submitted their paper before they got tenure, and it helped them get tenure. At least one of you, maybe both of you. Were you both pre-tenure when you submitted this?
yes.
Yeah. So they both gotten tenure since that time. So, systematic reviews are one way to get your name out there, and to, you don't have to get human subjects and all this other. So it can be kind of a speeded up in some ways study. But there are a lot of mental challenges in getting all of everything sorted out.
One thing done for sure.
Yeah.
I
So her study
resonate with that.
is like, comment, and share professional development through social media in higher education, a systematic review. Why don't you go ahead, Tien?
Okay. So I want to first thank Kurt to like invite me to be here. I am an associate professor at Old Dominion University. When I think I met Kurt at a AACE conference long time ago when I was a student, and he was the only one who joined my presentation session in Hawaii. Yeah, so I definitely remember you, and I really thank you for
2011.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. Yes. I don't remember which year, but I remember like everybody was out vacation.
They're at the swimming pool. I was looking
Right.
over this. Everyone
And
went
you're the
swimming
only
or
one
waving,
who
and I
are at
was
my
a serious
session.
one. Okay. That happened to me once. I once gave a workshop in Hawaii at the AEC eLearn conference. I had 100 people in the morning, and in the afternoon session, I had like 30. The other 70 went down to the swimming pool,
Yeah. Yeah, so
or the
I was
Waikiki
really
Beach.
thankful for that. Um, yeah, so let me just keep focus on this. So this study was actually, like I said, it was one of the like course papers collaborating with my students, but kind of like with this Canvas Freeman. She was my student at the time, and now she's already graduated, and she has the doctorate title in front of her. And Jill Stefania, she was actually the advisor of Candace at that time. So the three of us after that class, where Candace wrote the very first draft of this paper, and then the three of us came together and worked on this paper more, and kind of completely flipped it to to a large extent, and then finally got accepted in the special issue, which I was very pleased. So let's go to the next slide. Do I need to?
No, I need to just,
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so kind of just introduce a little bit context of this study. As the title implies, like, common, and share professional development through social media in higher education. So this context, the topic of study really arises out of the increasing responsibility of higher education faculty members, professors, and these higher education faculty members not only have to share the responsibility of teaching and doing research, but they also have to be disciplinary experts in their own respective field. But oftentimes they don't have the time to practice those skills anymore, and they're not in industry corporate anymore. So there is this huge need for professional development, both in the areas of faculty member doing their teaching and research responsibilities. So really having the expertise in instructional and pedagogical strategies and techniques, but also professional development for again the expertise in their own respective fields. So that's the kind of the need, the overall context for doing, sorry, I'm not done with that slide yet, but almost. Yeah, for using social media for professional development for higher education faculty members. So of course they're constrained by money and time, and kind of like the social media, again, the social media based professional development becomes like a natural like mean for them, for these faculty members to consider using it. So next slide. So here are my research questions. There haven't been a lot of research in this specific area, and the next slide, which in a minute you will see, I only have like 21 studies, I believe. So this area, specific areas of social media-based professional development for higher faculty members, definitely in its infancy stage. So I have these four research questions here. The first one is current trends in research. And this one looks at kind of very similar to Lawrence, kind of looking at the time span of how many articles were published over a certain period of time. And then the next question looks at the specific characteristics of those studies. So it looks at the type of studies found, social media tools identifying, and also these academic disciplines, those disciplinary areas where these studies were conducted. And it also look at the theoretical frameworks as well as research methodologies. I believe this is quite similar to Lawrence as well. And the last one are we look at the guidelines and implications exist out of the literature in this specific area. And the article identification process, this is pretty standard in kind of all the systematic review process. So initially I look at variety of major databases like JSTOR Web of Science and few of those. And then also look at the Google Scholar, just kind of the first 10 pages using a combination of keywords. And then we also hand search 3 major journals concerning professional development, the issue of professional development for higher education faculty members. So ultimately, after removing all the duplicates, we came down to 53. So the next stage we did screening, so very specific screening. So the specific criteria for this study per se is very very narrow. So we want these studies to be empirical studies. We wanted these studies have the focus on both social media and professional development. So some in higher education. So there are a fair amount of studies that are in like K-12 education or looking at, you know, teacher education, professional development. So those are studies were all excluded. And there are some studies that talk about professional development or talk about social media, and then they're in higher education context, but they're not focusing on faculty member professional development. So those are also excluded. So after that, ultimately, we came down to only 23 articles. So that's a fairly small number of articles. So going back to the first research question, looking at the trends. So in terms of the year of publication, realizing this study is fairly, I mean, from today's perspective, it's a little bit old. And I would say the whole social media landscape really shifted a lot, especially because Twitter have become to X. So in terms, again, going back to this question, in terms of the year of publication, you can see there's kind of an uptick like after 2012, like some of those social media tools, I would say, emerged and become, you know, a very hot area at that time. And then it's kind of subsided in a little bit, but of course, you know, the number of articles in the study is very limited. And not surprisingly, most of these studies were conducted in the North America context. Again, similar with Lawrence, only looking for English language journals. So that's the huge reason why. The next slide. And in terms of the types of professional development, so one thing that we did, I thought that was quite interesting in this study is we categorized the professional development initiatives into 2 major types. One is considered formal and the other one is considered informal. So the formal professional developments are usually have a very clear organizational setting. So typically it could be higher educational institutions have their own, you know, PD units on campus, and they have, you know, organized this type of professional development workshop or webinar or whatsoever. And then there is a social media piece integration within that setting. So those are considered more formal types of PD. And the other type is what we call informal. So informal ones are typically those that have no mention of any organizational context. And some of those are just kind of a large survey of, you know, faculty PD using social media. So those could be like just like users or faculty members voluntarily use social media in their own leisure time. So those are the studies that's considered informal. So interestingly, we did find more informal professional development types than the formal ones. And I think it's not a surprise as well, because social media considered the kind of entire landscape as most people use you know, at their own time and not really bounded by any organizational context.
So I'll just point out Fei Gao is listed in here, who will be presenting in about a half hour in here. I'm not sure if she's arrived yet. I don't think she has. I also want to mention George Valencianos is in here a couple of times. He's a guest in my dissertation prep class in 2 weeks on I think the 30th. I invited all of you, all my students, you can attend that. George is a former chair of distance learning in all of Canada, and he just moved to the University of Minnesota as an endowed chair. And also listed in here is Christine Greenhow, who was a guest in my R622 class last fall. If anyone was in 622, you might remember her as a guest. So yeah, a lot of these names are familiar.
Yeah, absolutely.
Including yours. There are people that have made a name for themselves in doing social media research, and you're among them, and Faye's among them, and George, and so forth.
Thank you for that comment, Kurt. Yeah, so the next question is about the specific tools and platforms. So again, recognizing this study is kind of like 5 years old now. So the whole social media landscape really shifted quite a bit. So at that time, the most used, most studied social media platform at that time is Twitter. It might still be right now, but probably not in the next 5 years. So Twitter was the top #1 most studied about on this specific topic of social media-based professional development. Use Twitter as their platform to engage faculty members in the professional development activities. And following that, Facebook, academia.edu, Google+, ResearchGate, and some of them also use quite a few different ones, or they don't specify which ones that were used. That's in terms of tools. Next slide, please. In terms of academic disciplines, a lot of them were in education. Some of them are in medical, and then followed by information science and technology and some other areas as well. So theoretical framework, this is, again, another interesting one that's kind of similar to what Lauren's finding. A few of those and don't have a very kind of pronounced theoretical framework that was stated in their studies, but mostly it used community of practice as the theoretical framework, and that's also the framework that in this systematic review that was used. And of course, social constructivism, situated learning, these are kind of a lot very relevant theories to community of practice. So all of these are basically like kind of concerns the constructivist or social learning theory that kind of sets the foundation for any type of social media use or integration in any learning or educational context. In terms of research methodology, quantitative, large surveys and questionnaires, those the predominant ones, and then followed by qualitative and a few mixed methods. Social network analysis was an interesting one, and there was also design-based research. Okay, I think this is my last slide. So, I'm not necessarily following these like specific guidelines and implication that were listed there. I will just kind of talk about kind of overall the takeaways came out of this systematic review. So I think one of the most important things that came out of this systematic review, and probably across like many social media related studies that I have done in the past, I've done probably over 20, could be more. I've published probably over 20 or even 30 social media studies in kind of the span of social media in a variety of learning contexts. I think the main
No, you're too young to publish all those.
That's a possibility. I'll go back and recount it. But yeah, so the main takeaway I would say is really to use these tools wisely and make sure that it's very clearly linked to its intended use. Being said, so with that, it's kind of, again, going back to what Lauren said earlier, technology use have to serve a purpose. So when social media or whatever technology that's introduced, I think especially in the case of social media, because people use it so frequently for their personal or recreational uses, and trying to integrate it or shift it that kind of the predominant use into using something for academic, it's it's kind of a mindset shift for people, and sometimes in this context of professional development or in a classroom context where students were asked to use social media tools, it sometimes could definitely be a challenge, become a challenge for any participants. So the main takeaway really is trying to make sure that you study your learners well, right? You do in this context of faculty development, it's really important to understand the faculty members' needs and characteristics within this context of that institution, and then the purpose of that faculty professional development. And I would say every discipline have its own unique niche of specific social media tools. So as far as I know, in education, at least in the last few years, Twitter, was kind of the big one. In a lot of educational faculty will use it, and also across the board. But in other disciplines, in STEM or engineering, they will use Slack or business. So there are other alternative social media tools out there that they could consider, and that serves a better purpose for that intended audience.
Yeah.
And also with different types of users. So LinkedIn, it has kind of its unique, for, job hunting, and kind of putting yourself out there, networking, that kind of things. And your ResearchGate, it could be, more for academic sharing of your scholarship. And, kind of these things, these different types of social media have its own intended use. So I think that's some of the big things to consider when we're considering integrating social media in like academic or professional development context. Yeah.
I listened to an interview by Bill Gates of Sam Altman from ChatGPT, and he said the number 1 tool he uses is Slack. Sam Altman uses Slack, and Bill Gates said his number 1 tool is Outlook and web browsing. Anyways, curious now if anyone has a question for Tian. Does anyone have a comment or a question on Tian's? Go ahead, Lena. Lena?
Yeah, here. First of all, thank you for your insightful presentation, Tian.
Thank you.
I'm a visiting scholar from China, Hefei Normal University, and I'm here with Kurt to have a 1-year study.
Wonderful.
I frequently use like, comment, and share in my routine. From my perspective, professional learning through social media is effective, but it also has some issues. And the question I would like to ask is, in your research, are there any specific strategies or best practices for educators to maintain professionalism and manage their digital identity on social media?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in the literature, it definitely have some strategies, or at least some guidance in this area. So I think it's really important to provide. So when you use social media for professional development, it is important to provide some, like, thinking of a professional development, like somebody that intended to like host or to design a professional development initiative. It's important to train your faculty members with some kind of pre-training to make sure that they are familiar with these specific features and tools that you intend to use for this type of professional development. And also, I think in from the informal landscape, where this is not, the use of social media is not coming from an organizational context, I think it's also important to be really engaged with those like ethical considerations and kind of self-regulated learning. So all of those things, I have another paper collaborating with the student on self-regulated learning, using like kind of using the self-regulating framework and look at social media use in the professional development context. So that paper could probably give you a little bit more implication as well. But it is important to consider yourself as a self-regulated learner, because there's so much misinformation out there on social media. people have, you know, diverse interests, and there is just this disparate interest and needs and aims for using social media for various purposes. So in order to not become diluted in all of these different areas of use, it is important to use your self-regulate learning strategies or techniques to make sure that you kind of really focus on whatever that you aim to achieve using social media.
Jill has a
Hope that
question.
makes sense.
No, Lena, is that? Lena?
Oh, I say thanks. It's very helpful.
You're welcome. I hope
Yeah.
that helped.
Jill, jump in here.
Hi, Dr. Luo. I would like
Hi.
to know two questions of my problems on social media. And the first one is
hope I
that
can answer.
I remember the first element on your slide is a square says experts versus
Professor.
professors.
Uh-huh.
So do you mean there is something that distinguish experts and the professors, and this kind of tool could be social media use, different kinds of use in social media? This is my first questions. Yeah, and my second question is that sometimes social media is associated with people's or say learners short memory or attention span. So do you think social media is a good idea, access or say a tool for people to distribute knowledge or co-construct knowledge or say for the professional development?
And before
Those
you
are-
answer, I'll just say that probably have to be the last question. We're going to go to Byron next. Faye
Right,
has
yeah.
arrived. Hi, Faye. We're a little bit behind, so
Hello,
if you need to
Hi.
duck
Hello,
out and
Tian.
come back, you
Hi.
know Tian because you do similar research.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, you
Seen
know
her
how
for a
Tian
long
and I got to know
time.
each other?
How?
He was
My
my
first year was
professor.
the assistant professor
Yeah.
at Ohio University, and Tian was my student.
Yes,
At where?
at
Ohio
University.
University.
Really? Oh.
So
Yeah.
that's why we collaborated on the paper.
Yeah.
The first
You
paper, we
didn't know this,
collaborated on a
right?
couple
Kurt?
paper while she was there.
What year were you at Ohio University?
It's
Probably
2019, probably 19 or 2020. 2020, probably.
not that late.
No.
Not
20,
that, no,
2012. 2010 or 2012.
2010.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, 2010.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. 2010, yes. And then I left
Yeah.
because my husband is at UT, so I came to Bowling Green State University.
Otherwise, we would have continued to collaborate more.
Yeah, exactly. And I was when I came to BGSU, it's totally a different environment as compared to Ohio University. So I started doing something else, and because they have different and they have other requirements on your service and everything. So it was a huge, it was a very difficult transition for me at that time. But now I'm all fine.
Well, my students might not be aware that Ohio University is not Ohio State. It's a different
Right,
university.
it's
So Ohio
Ohio.
is
Different.
it's like Miami of Ohio on the west side, and Ohio is on the east side, near where I was working at West Virginia University. It's up in the mountain areas, and they have
Right.
they have an escalator to go from the lower campus to the upper campus. It's such a big hill, no one wants to walk the
I heard
hill.
about that.
And yeah, they
Yeah.
have that since maybe they also have the #1 Halloween party in the whole country. So if you
Yeah,
want,
You're right.
I was there with my daughter. I
Yeah.
tried
People are
getting my
very
daughter to
crazy.
go there, but she didn't want to go to but I took her on on Halloween.
It's probably
I
better
actually
to
went
stay
there. It
indoors.
was fun, and actually, police was there too. So they tried to make sure everything is all good. So, but they were riding on a horse. They came
Yeah.
on a horse.
Yes, oh
So
yeah.
it was pretty
But
fun.
they do a lot of crazy stuff too. I heard one time like somebody like set the house on fire or something.
I shouldn't do that, but there's a lot of crazy
Hear
stuff.
that?
So, Tian, can you answer Jill's
Yes,
questions?
I'll
And
answer
then
Jill's
we'll move on
question
to
quickly.
Byron. And I'm sorry,
Yes.
Faye, you're going to be another 15, 20 minutes before we get to you. So if you want to hang, I mean.
Okay,
Um,
I can go and do something and come back.
Yeah,
Because
why don't you do that?
today I
Yeah,
just arrived
yeah,
back home, so I'm sorry.
yeah. Take
Totally
care
Yeah,
of
I
your,
won't take long. I'll just be very quick with Jill's
yeah.
question.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so the first question about the experts, any distinguishment between experts versus professors. I put that there on that slide was, I think I only did that because it's kind of setting the background of higher education, the increasing responsibility of higher educational higher education faculty members, because they do have these, on the one hand, they are the expert, they should be the experts of teaching and research, right? So they need to have, all this knowledge of instructional and pedagogical like strategies and techniques and knowledge. But on the other hand, they also need to be like keep up with disciplinary knowledge as well. So if, an engineering faculty, a biology faculty, they also, have to pretty be well versed with whatever that's going on in the industry, about engineering, biology, or whatever that might be. So that's why I put that as, experts and professor. And definitely I will agree that faculty should be the expert on both sides, but it's very hard. And that's why kind of the context of social media that come in can hopefully provide a little bit of just in time help on both regards, like on the instructional side, but also on the domain specific area. So that's I think that would be what I want to say about question one. And this next question about short attention span. I think I have read like neuropsychology research about the use of social media or frequent use of social media could be potentially related to short attention span. So I think I wouldn't, don't quote me, but I think there are definitely research out there in the neuroscience side. And I think in terms of the question of whether it's the ideal tool for professional development, I think just given the fact that it's free and open and accessible, so just because of these three characteristics, I think at least you should be aware and be able to take advantage of it. And of course, I also, previously mentioned about, the ethical considerations and then also the self-regulated learning. Those, I think you definitely have to keep those considerations in mind. But it is important to, at least as educators or instructional designers or faculty members, or future faculty members, we need to take advantage of these opportunities because it's free, it's out there. It's a lot of the great resources like Kurt is curating, they're out there, and on social media, just there's so much is out there. It's a good practice to really to keep abreast with them, whether or not you actually be, very active, be a active social media, like you're posting all the time. You don't have to do that. But I think it's important to get out there to at least, curate those resources that you need, or, crowdsource, like if you have a very specific problems at hand and you can post this problem on social media and then, get answers from multiple, people that they have, different, very varied expertise in different areas. So that would always be I think a good practice to at least to try to, problem solve on, using a free space. Yeah. That would be my answer.
Thank you. Thank you. I totally
You're
agree
so
with you.
welcome.
Yeah. Thank you.
So it's also a way to get your data. So in my dissertation prep class, social media is one of the top ways in which people get data nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, very important. And I don't know if who was your advisor at Ohio University after Faye left?
David Moore.
David Moore. Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, we have at Ohio, we have IST alums there. We have IST alums at North Texas, a couple of them. We have IST alums at West Florida. We have
Old Dominion too.
At Old Dominion. Who is at Old Dominion?
Well,
I think we do there too. I mean, almost
think you do.
everywhere. So
I can't think of a name right now.
Yeah, at
But
Bowling
I'm
Green.
pretty sure you do.
Yeah. Where Faye is now, Bowling Green is my former advisee in Ed Psych. Was an associate dean. Anyways, they were all around. Byron's been waiting patiently, and so we probably need to move to him. Lauren and Tien, I want to thank both of you for coming in tonight. If you want to stay, but you probably have
Yeah, I probably have to
kid
go.
duties. So let's give them both a round of
Thank you so
applause
much
for
for
coming
having
tonight.
me here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thanks. And we'll get you again. I'll send you the link to the recording later on. So thank you, Lauren.
Bye. Thanks so much, guys. I'll watch the rest of it. Send me the link. I promise. I'm just on my own right now. So take care.
I'll do that too.
We'll see you at ACT,
Nice
I
meeting
hope. And I'll
everybody.
introduce you to everyone live at ACT. So
Love it. All right.
thank
Take care.
you. Thank you. So Byron, you're third in the list here, and then we'll come back to Faye. We'll be after you. So and thanks for some of you who have come in here. Faye, again, if you need to attend to dinner with your kids, so it's going to be another 15, 20 minutes before we get to you. So, but we want to go to the slides. Byron, I've got the slides called up. Can I just?
You could,
So
or Kurt, could I share?
you can go ahead and share it yourself. That's totally fine.
Yeah, if that's all right.
Yep,
Let's see
sure.
here. Let me see if I've got this. Do we see that?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll start off, and I'm going to talk more just sort of about the study versus all the details, because you can read it
Right.
on your own. And so I kind of want to talk about a few of the things that Lauren and Tien mentioned.
Byron,
one
before you
thing-
do that, you're an associate professor, right?
Full
professor
yes.
now.
Oh,
Okay,
yes.
at West Florida in Pensacola. So if you want to visit a nice place, a sunny
Oh, yeah.
place with beautiful sunrises and sunsets, that's the place to go because right on the Gulf. They have great restaurants on the Gulf and just hang out and
Yes.
it is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place. So you're lucky to work there. So you want to tell them your interests before you go into this study?
Sure. So my interest is really emerging technologies. And part of what got me interested in doing something like this is, what are we talking about when we use the word, learning environment? What is a learning environment? I mean, is me using this, is that a learning environment? Or, we have smart watches and things like that. Is that a learning environment? And I tend to think it is. I think we can make any type of technology, we can learn from it, and that can become a learning environment. And I became kind of fascinated with that idea of being anywhere and that being, ubiquitous type technologies that we have, and you can be learning from them, and that can be that learning environment. That kind of got me into being interested in this whole wearables type thing. As I talk through this and we have questions and such, please feel free to ask at any point in time. There are some learnings from this. And then I did want to go back and touch upon, it was Lauren and Tien, they said something about, as you're thinking about either meta-analysis or any type of systematic review of literature or anything like that, as you're working on your dissertation, or several of you may have interest in a certain content topic area, it's just a great way to consider further publications in that area. You're already doing the literature review already, and it's just another way to sort of focus in on that, and just another opportunity. This came about really through several previous years of Megan and I looking around at all the different types of things that were going on in the wearables, I guess the world of wearables, in terms of using those for education. And the world is really quite small in terms of wearables. Years ago, I did get this is the original smart Apple Watch, that first year they came out. And I thought it was just going to be this thing where we're going to have all kinds of educational apps and we can watch videos on these little things. And it never turned out to that. And even to this point, to this day, we're still not quite where I ever thought we would be in terms of educational wearables. But that whole, in a nutshell, that's how this study came about. So I'll go ahead and get into it a little bit. We had for several years been doing some literature reviews and in finding out what people were doing with these wearables, and a lot of them were publishing different types of studies, but what did these things look like? So I actually had some of my grad students reach out to the original researchers and send us their photographs of their studies and what the wearables even looked like. You know, you're always reading about these things. It's like, what is it, you know? But at the time, and I got to tell you, this is just an incredible opportunity offered to Megan and I by Kurt, and we just really appreciated it. What we saw at the time was there wasn't really any synthesis of the quantitative research, especially in terms of what are the effects of wearables on learning and motivation outcomes. There wasn't anything out there. And, you know, as we're trying to find out and you're looking and doing literature searches and all of this going on, like, why isn't anybody else doing this? It was just an interesting little niche that we kind of found and really kind of pursued it. So we decided to pursue the approach through a meta-analysis, and you can kind of see the process here and 6 questions that guided the study. But these are some of the original photographs sent by some of the researchers and such that were doing some of these. These are just some, you know, fitness trackers, which is a whole lot of the literature out there right now is fitness trackers, but e-textiles and using those and creating fun types of things and such, and even, you know, wearables for pets and that type of thing. So it was just fun kind of in those years prior to this, just getting photographs, you know, attachments from the researchers to say, well, we didn't, you know, share this or anything, but this is a snapshot I took while we were doing this study and things like that. But really wondering, do these wearables, do they really positively influence learning or not? And as I kind of don't so much talk at the slides or talk through the slides, whatever, I'll talk about it. It's like, is there really a you know, positive effect or not? And how can we use these? And so when we talk about the outcomes, we wanted to look at you know, cognitive, obviously, but also affective, psychomotor, and we also looked at motivation outcomes, as you know from the study that you can look at later or that you've already read. The different types of research designs. Now, when we talk about a meta-analysis, it needs to be able to either have published or if we could derive an effect size. And as you'll see in a moment, you know, if you were to go do a search in something like IEEE for wearables, I mean, this was when we published it at the time, 62,000 on wearables. I bet you it's up to about 80,000, 90,000 right now. Go type in wearables into the IEEE database. Let's say it's 80,000 at this point in time. Now, what happens is that's all studies and presentations and publications and everything else. What's going on, though, is those are proof of concept studies, oftentimes just post-test only. There's no way to really derive effect size or anything like that. So there's a whole lot of people doing research about it, but these are weak studies, weak study designs where we can't really see if there's an effect on learning outcomes. That was the part that was really kind of discouraging, big picture wise, for our actual study. Was like, wow, all of this is going on, but these studies, they lack so much rigor and such. So here's the criteria that we had. And as I do talk about this, I don't mind admitting some of our shortcomings. I believe that one of these, and I'm somewhat kicking myself, Kurt, behind the scenes. I wish we had gone back before 2016. Further back, there were still some studies that could have been included. Not that many, though. I'm telling you, once again, because of the lack of rigor, pre-test, post-test, two-group designs and such. And so a lot of that is just oversight for us by choosing that. But as I say, when you see 62,000, you're saying, we gotta scale this down. There's no way we can do that. But once you start really going through, and here I'll just briefly say that with IEEE, we had to really reel in our search criteria to really hone in on what exactly we were looking for. And through trial and error, we were able to really narrow it down. Whereas you go to Eric, we're all familiar with Eric. We went into wearable, whatever it could have been, with the asterisk, that wild card after that. And with those dates as the filter, only 65 studies. Really interesting that, Eric and Ed research were kind of getting into it, whereas IEEE, they're doing a lot of the research on the technology, but the merging of the technology with the actual learning, not a whole lot was taking place, somewhat more now. Now this right here, I'll tell you, and if anybody wants to talk more about meta-analysis or not, I have another one that's going on where this N at the top is like 1900 something. It has to do with flipped classroom. But this is our Prisma diagram, and you can kind of see how things shake out here. 12 studies, 20 outcomes or effect sizes. And so we chose to either hand calculate these or they were published in the study. What I would suggest now, and something that we use towards the end of the study, and certainly that I'm using now for the flipped classroom, is comprehensive meta-analysis. It's a software. And this is something that students, it's just a software any of you could use, and a couple of you could partner together and focus on meta-analysis for a topic area. Again, systematic review or whatever, but again, it's something that's can be done. I would say it can be easily done. As Lauren and Etienne said, there's a lot of behind the scenes work on this stuff, even honing it down. It doesn't look like we had a whole lot of studies in this particular meta-analysis. We didn't, but the behind the scenes work was still quite a bit. So we ended up using SPSS for all our calculations. I would certainly say, no, really use a software that's for that. So comprehensive meta-analysis, we use version 3 for later on in the actual, towards the end of the study. In this, I'm just going to kind of talk through, because I don't know how much, I can tell you about it. It's just that, yes, there is a positive effect of wearables on learning outcomes, and that's the overall learning outcomes. That's each cognitive, affective, psychomotor, and motivation.
Well, that's important finding.
And this is something called a forest plot.
Right.
And it shows you the effect size and then confidence intervals, and you kind of see where they fall out. And generally, you're looking between -1 and 1, and really you want to look really between 0 and 1. When you see them outside of or above 1, it's really kind of questionable. So that one up towards the top, we could have, if it's several standard deviations above, we could have not included that. So cognitive was significant here. So cognitive learning outcomes, not so much affective, psychomotor, or motivation.
But still, the affective was significant. It's just a smaller significance.
Smaller, yes.
It's a P of 0.02, so that's still significant. And
Yes.
so it's
Yeah,
cognitive
I
and
apologize,
affective. Yeah, not psychomotor, not motivation. Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
Now, I think that psychomotor, I tend to wonder if there couldn't be something more, but again, we're looking at only 3 studies there.
Yeah.
And I think there's much more in terms of teaching fine skills, surgery skills and such now through some of this, that we could actually see something there. I'm always curious to see how we can find technologies and harness them for learning, and I was kind of discouraged about that one. So again, it's these obviously none of the one group post-test only could even be included, but the 2 group pre-test post-test, and these are the stronger designs anyway. So there was the significant finding there. When we think about and this is kind of challenging. It's like, do we think about VR headsets as wearables? And we didn't here. We had head-mounted displays, and these were sort of like almost like your Google Glass or some of the new AR glasses and things that they're talking about or that we're seeing. That's what we refer to as head-mounted displays. So that was significant. Smart clothing, again, just because the small number of studies, but that certainly could have been probably.
Go back
nowadays.
once again to the
Yes,
previous
sure.
slide. So it's number 2 and number 4, which has really taken off since that study, is fitness trackers and smartwatches.
Yes.
Not so much smart clothing, not so much head-mounted. The holy grail was always the head-mounted devices, and it's not happened yet. No,
Right,
that will happen.
yeah.
It will happen someday, just like e-textbooks. All of a sudden, were promised forever, and all of a sudden happened. It'll happen someday, but it's not yet.
Yeah.
But fitness trackers have happened. Smartwatches, yeah. Smart clothing, not so much. Unless you're Jill or Lena, who wears really smart, they're really wearing smart clothing.
It's really interesting, even some of the big companies pulling out of the head-mounted displays. And
They are.
such. It's amazing, but
No.
it's almost as if, and I've talked with other faculty at other universities, and it's the AR is still not to the level that it needs to be for
Yeah.
these head-mounted displays to be as effective as they can. So the
Too-
technology needs to catch up,
Yeah, too
and then it'll
heavy.
become,
Disorientating. It's too heavy or too
Yes.
expensive.
Right.
Number one is the expense. And the
Yes,
ones that
definitely.
are lighter and you're not disoriented, it costs $3,000, $4,000,
Right.
And so
Yeah.
you look at refrigerators, you look at stoves, you look at microwaves, until something comes down the $600, $500 price range, people don't buy them. Just
Right.
can't afford them. So I'm digressing, but it is an important point.
Yes.
Why don't you go ahead to the next slide, and maybe we'll get some questions then from the audience here.
Educational environment. So this was also interesting that of the studies, there wasn't anything in terms of business, industry, military, healthcare, or anything like that, because we were kind of looking, I do anyway, for other sectors and seeing if there's other influence of technology and learning outcomes in these other areas, and not so much. And so you can see the majority of the studies were in K-12.
Yeah. Well, that maps on because that's where the money is.
Yes.
The government, it's all, it's
Yeah.
not going to be with adults beyond higher ed because there
Right.
isn't a lot of federal funding and support for it. It's all the K-12 levels. It's always been that way. And the people go for the grants and they study
Yeah.
K-12, but they should be studying adults as well.
Yeah.
It's just not happening.
You
So
know, there could be, influence on a lot of the way we do things in business, industry, healthcare, et cetera. But as you're saying with the grants and such, and here, even, minors.
yeah, and the business,
well.
healthcare, and all, and they're not getting published because they're parochials, their studies for their company or for their healthcare setting, and they don't want the data going beyond that
Right.
institution or organization.
Yeah.
So that's why the K-12 studies all get published, and some higher ed ones, of course, as well. But not so much. But the military, to some degree, they will want their stuff published to some degree. But the healthcare and corporate, isn't typically going to find its way unless it's a value-added thing where they have the technical report on their homepage and they're getting recognized for that, having done that research. Sorry, again, I digress,
Right.
but it's an important point
It is,
here in
definitely.
understanding where this research is coming from. The majority or a lot of this stuff is K-12 because that's just where the federal money and the nonprofit foundations are focusing the money on K-12. It's just in the US anyhow. I'm not sure in China or Taiwan where Lena and Alicia and Jill are, but go ahead. I probably need to wrap up a little after this. And
Yes, certainly. Here was just the different strategies. Project-based, but there were other strategies, and we actually there's literature behind these, why these were grouped and such, and that's in the actual publication.
Well, that area is probably the most important area to be looking at anyways.
Yes.
It's something that definitely needs a follow-up, and that's where you operationalize all that's
Yes.
going on. It's in pedagogical strategies around use, right? So, yeah.
But I believe overall, Kurt, that's sort of what I had for the presentation.
Yeah. What was that last slide real quick? Let's go back to that
This
one.
was my mini
Yeah.
majors
Yeah,
all
right.
together here. You know, if I were to say anything, it would be that fourth bullet is the lack of research rigor, and then us possibly for the meta-analysis, we should have probably gone back further
Right.
in time.
Right.
But I would really like to see more focus on strong research designs in this area, and just see what's going on and see if there is continued I don't know, significant and positive effect size.
Right.
It's an area I'm still waiting for this to become a really, really good learning environment
Yep.
that I can use anywhere, you know?
Well,
It's not.
Sony and Samsung and LG want fold-out smartwatches,
Right.
and you have bigger screens, then it's going to happen, or something like that. But that, it's been promised for a decade, and there's mock-up, beta testing, but it's not made the general public. It's coming. Questions for Byron? You can ask him any question. You can, what's it like to live in Florida? What's your favorite color for wearable technologies? So any questions on this?
I have a question.
Okay, sure.
I think this is a variable. This is very important topic. But just now, when I look at your last slide, I'm curious about. Do you think there's significant differences in the impact of variable on education across different subjects or disciplines? Do you find it?
No, only because it would have been so small in terms of comparing those studies. That would be interesting, a really good question. But we would need many more studies to be able to do that. Because again, that could be a question of, okay, what type of strategy and content area? It's something that, yes, it's gonna take more time. It's a great question. I was thinking about it with this other flipped classroom meta-analysis that we're looking at with content areas, especially looking at K-12 mathematics outcomes, and there is positive effects. So that's one area. But wearables, the body of literature is going to have to grow. The research literature is going to have to be strong enough to produce those effect sizes as well. So great question.
Thank you.
Jill. You're muted, Jill, but that's okay. We'll lip read.
Hi, Professor Hubbard.
Hi.
I remember the last 2 or last 3 slides focusing on the pedagogical types. Yes, I'm very surprised to find out none of the pedagogical types reach the statistic significance, including the project-based, task-based pedagogies. So do you think it implies that our technology supported or enhanced pedagogies on wearable devices lack the so-called long-term design? Teachers or educators only design for the short-term use. And another highlight in your presentation is slide, only the cognition-related studies reach statistical significance instead of motivational or psychological.
Psychomotor.
Yeah, affective.
But affective did as well. Affective and cognitive.
I keep overlooking that, Kurt. You're right. Cognitive and affective did, but psychomotor and motivation did not. Here, Jill, with the strategies, project-based did, but just barely. And these others.
Yes.
What comes into question though here is other confounding variables in terms of game-based. Did
So
they,
a lot of game
did they
only
only,
used for one time or
Yeah.
twice.
and
Probably.
what type of game-based strategy? Because if they used one type of strategy that was some type of a game-based versus another strategy that's still considered game-based, it's still comparing apples to oranges too
Right.
much. Once again, it's because of the small number of studies.
Right, that's,
Okay,
that's,
yeah.
Which,
so
which
the
keeps
N
going.
here, N here is number of students. The
Ye-
K is the number of studies.
Yes.
Okay,
Mm.
so this is a little deceiving here. If we had 100 studies, we'd be able to find
Yes.
out something, right?
Yeah.
So, but you did the best you could given the data that exists. That's where you start, and then you see in systematic reviews of the research, you start there, and then you see where are the gaps, what aren't people studying, and then you plow ahead and you make your justification for your study or dissertation based on the gaps. So systematic reviews helps you find the gaps, but there's a lot of disadvantages to systematic reviews. It's not a specific focus on a particular aspect of psychology or instructional design or whatever. It's an overview. And often they're apples and oranges, and they're non-comparable. It's a quick way to get a sense of what's going on in the field, but often you're not answering real specific questions.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see that in the three. I'm going to summarize 3 studies real quick, just a quick over. They're kind of blah, blah. Some of the findings are, you don't get real excited about them, but yet you see there's a gap somewhere. And oh, okay. Yeah. So any final comment for Byron? Anyone want to make a final comment? Well, I would. I want to thank him for waiting patiently while we had 2 other people present. And he's got his hectic schedule today all day. He's been working and teaching. He teaches undergrads, he teaches master's students, and he teaches doctoral students. West Florida has all 3. They started a doctoral program. They started an undergraduate program in learning design and technology. And then they had the bread and butter master's program for a long time there. So he's got 3 things on his plate constantly. And he's doing dissertation supervision as well as helping undergrads. We don't have undergrads in our program, and it's still hard. We have 2 doctoral programs. It's hard enough. I can't imagine teaching a program where you have undergrads, masters, and doctorals. Is that, well, I'm right? Is that pretty hard to do?
We try to think of it at different levels, like application, leadership, and I guess leading small teams or something is the middle, the masters, being ID and leading the teams, but the undergrads for the application, leadership being the doctoral. But trying to, juggle between that, sometimes it gets a little bit crazy. Kurt, I appreciate your kind words. I really do. I also appreciate this opportunity this evening, and some great students. And students, I hope y'all really appreciate Kurt. He's amazing. And I just, thanks so much.
Well, we definitely are thankful that you arrived tonight, and this is recorded. So next year's students, my 2025, spring of 25, you're going to be watching this. I'm going to have 2 sections next year, face-to-face and online. So we'll get twice the exposure for you. And who knows the questions that they'll be sending to you next spring in 2025. So let's give them a round of applause to Byron here and wave goodbye, everyone. Thank you all. Thank you, Byron. And
thanks so much.
We'll be talking. You'll be at ACT maybe, and we'll see you there.
All right, I'll see you.
We can have a reflective drink. I owe you one.
Hey, great. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you.
See y'all.
See you. So Faye is up to the batter's box, and she's been waiting patiently as well. And she was my mentee. I guess she still officially is my mentee. Once you are a mentee, you always are.
Definitely.
Yeah. So AERA, American Education Research Association, assigned Faye to be my mentee. Oh, maybe it was 10 years ago or so.
Yeah.
Maybe it was it Philadelphia? It was not quite 10 years ago. So it was maybe 8 years ago, but somewhere.
Long time ago.
Yeah. So Faye and I, we got to know each other over the years, and she sent me such a lovely gift a year ago. This wooden eagle. It's just a gigantic one. It's in my dining room, and I look at this all the time. It's like, I like wooden things. I go to Thailand and I go to Malaysia or I go to Vietnam. I go to the night markets and get anything in wood. I'll buy a suitcase. And Faye when I didn't have to buy it, I didn't have to get a suitcase, she sent it to me. I'm like, this is really cool. So thank you, Faye,
I'm
for
so
that.
glad you like it.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. So, so now my students know that I like wooden things.
You'll be
From-
receiving more wooden things, I
from-
guess.
Especially from Thailand and Southeast Asia, but East Asia too. And I digress a little bit. So Faye is part of the special issue as well, and her presentation is a systematic review of the research on mobile game-based learning. Before I got your slides loaded, Faye, and
Uh-huh.
you might have them as well. Have you changed them? I assume they're the same.
I didn't change anything.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
you can please just use that slide.
I'll pull them up as soon as, right
Okay.
after. So we had a panel at ACT a few years ago when the special issue came out and before the special issue. And Faye was part of both the panel before the special issue and the panel after the special issue, because, you know, Faye's really important. Because she was studying a very important topic called social media, and also she's doing mobile learning. She's doing gamification. She studies online learning. She studies blended learning. She studies, you know, as with social media, Twitter. Her research on Twitter is the tops. I mean, I presented in my class all the time. She was one of the first researchers of Twitter out there, and so you might want to briefly, before you go to your slides, talk about, because this is on mobile learning, you want to talk about your social media research briefly before we open your slides up.
Okay, Kurt, you really make me feel very good about myself. Thank you.
You should. We can all bow in your presence, you know.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So, actually, talking about social media research, to talk about that, I need to talk about being a researcher in general. So it feels like I have been constantly shifting and moving and trying to find what is the research area that really interests me, that I can really show my uniqueness in my research study. I think after so many years, after eventually becoming a professor, I start to realize how important it is that the research area actually allows you to be unique. Like if you come to this topic, you think differently on a different dimension or something other researchers may not be interested to study, or they may try to they saw it and then they ignore it, but you are the one who want to pick it up and study more. So I have been looking for this particular area, and social media is one of them. It's one of my journey. So, and as you, Kurt talked about, now I'm kindly still shifting to different areas, and I kind of narrow down a little bit right now, and I kind of figure out that might be my unique area that I want to stay in. But it really is a long-term journey, and the sooner you start it, the better. But don't expect you can find it at the very beginning. When you, I still remember when I was a doctoral student, they asked the professor usually asks you to write a literature review on the area you are interested in. And that's what we do. And I'm always expecting, okay, this is my focus. I'm going to do that all the time. I'm going to develop my expertise on that particular thing. But usually it's not the case. When you know more about the area, that may make you get interested in a different related area. And after a long term of seeking, find just a hide and seek game. And then you kind of realize, okay, this is probably something that I really want to do. So I did an online discussion at the very beginning and then moved to social media a little bit. And now I'm kind of, and I did the game-based learning. It's kind of gradually moving toward what I'm really interested in. And now I'm thinking more deeply about game-based learning, and I figure out the personality traits is very important in game-based learning, and I figure out different game elements and mechanism actually impact people with different personality very differently. So that might be something I really like, because I'm really interested in psychology related issue. Those are the things that I can see I can focus more in depth in the next couple of years.
Yeah, that's why maybe we
Sorry,
were
I'm not talking about social media.
No, it's okay. That's probably why we
Uh-huh.
were mapped up, because I'm an educational psychologist, you know.
Uh-huh.
And so we talked about Ohio University. That's on the east side of Ohio. Faye is at Bowling Green University. That's on the west side, upper west side. It's near Detroit, not maybe 2 hours away from Detroit or so.
Right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Or near Toledo and other.
Yeah,
so-
close to Toledo. If you
Toledo.
know the city Toledo.
Yeah, that's where she is. And she's working with Heijin Cho, who's Vanessa Denon's former advisee. And Heijin, I'm going to invite to come next week. So we're going to get another Bowling Green person in probably 2 weeks. And you probably never heard of Bowling Green. Well, there's two Bowling Greens. One's in Ohio and one's in Kentucky. If you go to Kentucky, you can go to what's called the Caves of Kentucky. They have beautiful big caves that people like to go down. You can do, Lena and Alicia, you can do a day trip down there. The other person who's at Bowling Green is my former advisee from 20 years ago. Her name is Julia Matuga. Faye, do you know Julia?
Oh, yeah, you mentioned her
Yeah,
a long time ago. I
yeah.
never got a chance to meet her, but I saw her name on the website.
Yeah. She was a dean there for a bit. She
Uh-huh.
studies creativity and art and Neo Vygotsky scaffolded learning stuff. Anyways, I'm going to open up the slides and we'll see if we can get to where we were. I don't think that's the right. Well, there we go. Let's see that one right there.
Oh,
There
thank
we
you.
go.
So I think I just we can go through the slides together, and whenever I see something interesting, I can talk more about it, so that we do not have to talk about everything in the slide. So the whole purpose of doing this research, we know it's very promising research area. Those are digital game-based learning, gamification, mobile-based learning. A lot of researchers are conducting research in these areas, and they are very promising because they always show, if you read any like meta-analysis, systematic review, what you find is they have a positive effects on student learning and sometimes on student motivation too. So game-based learning have been reviewed a lot, mobile learning the same, and there's limited research on mobile game-based learning in STEM education. I try to focus on STEM education. This is another advice I want to give. Is STEM education, you really need to find a content area. I'm not sure whether Kurt agree with me on that. So my experience is a content area is important. Otherwise, you just if you just know the technology, you are not familiar with the content. It's very difficult for you to integrate the technology in a meaningful way that can facilitate learning. You really need to have a good understanding of a content. Then you will be able to do that. I realized that, and I started to see whether I hope I could heard that when I was a doctoral student. And so I started to figure out maybe I want to focus on STEM, and that's why the whole purpose of writing this literature review on mobile game-based learning in STEM education. And the first two questions is more general. You can find it in any literature review, like what the context of the study, research foci, and methodology, what is measured and how it is measured. And I want to go more in depth in this particular review, showing something specific to mobile game-based learning. So I try to look at the factors that affect the nature of mobile game learning. And also I want to see what are the specific mobile game features that really that had been studied in those research articles, and whether they are guided by any learning theory principle when they design the mobile games. Okay, so the article selection criteria, I think you can read it on your own later, but it's just peer-reviewed journal article, empirical study, and related to the topic, and we have some criteria, so we exclude certain type of articles, and at the very end, we have 30 articles.
So you'll notice this in all the studies for the, not all, but almost all the studies in this special issue will have this. All the ones in next week's special issue, because these 2 first weeks are on systematic reviews of the research. The other 13 weeks or 12 weeks might not be. So only these first couple weeks you'll see it. So the other 12 weeks, you might have just, there might be specific studies or interventions that are not overviews. These are all overviews or summary studies. That's not going to be the case every week. Maybe only one more of the special issues we're reading is related to systematic reviews of the research. Okay, so if you're bored with systematic reviews of the research, or you think only Dr. Monk only assigns systematic reviews of the research, that's not true. I assign them for the first 3 weeks because they're good ways to get into the literature, to understand emerging technologies. And I also was the editor of these first 2, so I know a bit about them. I can bring people in to present on them. So that's why I started with these. There's other reasons as well, but I think they're good ways to dip your toes in a little bit before getting to the other kinds of special issues that might be out there on AI or on immersive learning. There are 10 or 6 studies, specific studies. These are big picture kinds of things. Sorry, Faye, but it was important to point that out.
No. I think it's very helpful because for the students at the very beginning, I think it's good to read a lot of systematic review so they know a lot of areas and have a basic understanding. They can see the differences of those areas and also commonalities, which are very important for them to really understand the educational research in general.
Yeah, I'll make a bold statement. Sometimes in the old days, when Faye and I were in college and graduate school, we have professors who assign us maybe 1 book or 2 books to read.
Yes.
And basically, the first 3 weeks of the semester are like reading 2 books. And
I had that experience.
Yeah, I've had those experiences too. And so basically, I could have assigned just the first 3 weeks and let you pick whatever you want the rest of the semester, and we'd still be accomplishing enough just from these 2 special issues. There's enough stuff, enough content in these 2 to get your mind going and thinking about research. Anyhow, so if you feel like that's why I told you to read 3, 4, or 5 articles a week. Don't read them all because your brain will get too mushy. Pick the couple you want, and I'll bring people in to explain some of them. They might get you excited about their research. Now they all might want to read your article, Faye, for this week. So that's good. Yeah, hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah, I think keep an open mind at the very beginning is the most important thing. You want to get yourself immersed in very different, diverse perspectives and research and different scholars, and you can grow from there. Those all provide nutrition.
Very good. So what's on this study? Tell them what this slide tells them.
So this is a few things that I try to look at: years, outlet of publication, context, research focus, methodology, measure, instrument. We'll talk about each one later when we get to the result page. So the findings, this is not really interesting. You can just take a look and know what journal it's published on, and that there's a trend. I would assume this is to 2019. So I assume the trend is going up still.
And those first 3 are what's called Social Science Citation Index, SSCI, the top journals in the field.
Yes.
This is stuff's getting published in the top journals.
That's right. Okay, as you can see, most of the mobile game-based learning are were conducted in elementary and middle school, not much high school. When you look at those numbers, you can think about it, what it actually means. So maybe it's because it's easier to do it in elementary school or middle school, or maybe it's because only elementary and middle school students are more interested in mobile game-based learning. So, and what happened is not clear there, but It'll give you a sense that this might be something you want to figure out in the future, or maybe you want to try to do more higher education, but you want to give yourself a rationale for why you are doing that. And for subjects, it's the same thing. A lot has been done in science and mathematics, but not much engineering. Is that more difficult to have to design a mobile base? That might be possible. I think that might be the one possible reason. Design a mobile-based game focused on engineering engineering learning. And the settings, formal and semi-formal, are the predominant setting type, and we only have 2 informal settings. Sample size, and looking at the duration, you'll find most of the study, about half of the study, were conducted within 1 day. So you are thinking about the novelty effect and how that impact other results of the study. We really need a lot more longitudinal study in perhaps not just mobile-based game learning in STEM education, but education research, but particularly and technology-supported educational research, computer-supported assisted research in general. We probably need
So
more.
going back to my comment earlier, the federal government and the Department of Education and the NSF, they're funding elementary and middle school STEM. And not as much high school, and definitely not funding beyond college. So that's why all these studies, again, there's money out there they want kids excited about STEM. They want to get young people interested in STEM fields, especially women in STEM.
That
So
makes
there's
sense.
and there aren't many K-12 engineering departments. So that's why there's not a lot of engineering. That being said, the state of Massachusetts mandated engineering in their K-12 a couple decades ago. So there's some places that are doing engineering related stuff, and that's increasing.
Okay.
It's increasing, yeah. But
Okay.
this makes a lot of sense.
That really helps. That helped me make sense of those data. Thank you, Kurt.
You'll add me to the paper later.
Yes. Okay, so the majority of the study and it just try to examine the effectiveness of using mobile-based game to learn. And can we, yeah. So usually what they do is they do a experimental or quasi experimental study comparing mobile game-based learning with traditional approach. And some other focuses on flow, perceptions, experience, collaborative learning. And what I appreciate most, the type of research I appreciate most is the research focus on design features, that is examining a specific design feature, like a specific game feature, or a specific instructional strategy that can be incorporated into the mobile game, and see how that is different, how the enriched environment, mobile game-based environment is different from the baseline mobile game-based research, so that we can know, we can tease out the effect of a particular feature or particular instructional strategy in mobile game-based learning. Now, if you compare in a general way, just compare the effectiveness of the mobile game-based learning approach with the traditional approach, usually people will get overall, okay, the mobile game-based approach is the winner, and that's it. You do not learn a lot from it. And what we want to see is it's a more fine-tuned understanding of what it means to design a good mobile game-based learning experience for the students. Okay, so there are different measures ranging from student learning performance to less used, such as teacher opinion, student emotions, and some majority of them, about half of them, actually just use one measure. And there is one article using 4 measures. I couldn't remember which article is that, but then it has a multi-dimension measure for the effectiveness of mobile game-based learning. Okay, and this different type of instruments are used for measure the outcomes. So, assessing learning, which is very common, self-report questionnaire survey, which is very common, interview, observation, and the last one is process data. It seems a lot of article actually incorporated process data into their analysis. I think now we may have more article incorporating that data in and analyzing it in a more advanced way based on the development of learning analytics. And this is what I want. What I want to find here is what specific mobile feature they are using in their mobile game-based learning. So mobile feature, there are several different mobile features based on Clover and the colleagues, and including portability, interactivity, context sensitivity, connectivity, and individuality. So the majority of them will incorporate portability, social interactivity, and also I think there's one more context sensitivity. So those are usually when they try to use mobile devices to do that, that's why they choose to use mobile device. And for game features, what they have, actually it's just very common game elements, score, points, narrative, having a story that helps students start a adventure on something, levels, stages, leaderboard, and role playing. So the majority of them, like out of 30 articles, 21 were using scores, points, coins. So this is a very common game feature in mobile game-based learning for STEM education. And we have 2/3 of the study actually specify what kind of learning theory and principle guide their design of the mobile-based game. But sometimes when you look more closely, you'll find they may mention one learning theory or principle, but it's actually not organically integrated into the whole design of the game. They use the theory as a theoretical framework in the article, but not as a really as a guideline for designing their game design. So you may see this kind of situation happening in various articles. The sincere integration of the learning theory into the design is highly desired. Okay, so I try to conclude the presentation by summarizing the types of study needed in the future. So most of them I have already mentioned in my previous presentation on other slides. So we need study move beyond the simple comparison of traditional approach and mobile game-based approach. We need studies that base the design of a mobile game on learning theories, sincerely base the design on on learning theories and motivational theories. And we also need longitudinal study, replication studies, because really those researchers are examining the learning of very different areas. It's very hard to synthesize their findings across the studies because they are using such different mobile design games, and their learning areas are so different. We can just have a general conclusion, but it's hard for us to have any specific conclusion on what specific design would be good for for learning what specific content. So the last thing I want to say is when you go into this area, mobile game-based learning, maybe it's not just mobile game-based learning, it's a lot of related area. And there are a lot of factors we have to consider. The context, the learning content, the types of activity, and the feature of the technology. In this case, it's the mobile features, and also the strategies, the feature of the strategies you are choosing. You are choosing. So for this one, it's the game features, but also you can probably incorporate some instructional strategies in the middle. So it's a combination of all these things interacting together. Okay, that's all.
So Faye's email is in there. I will send it again to everybody so you have it. And I'll see if we have any questions. Esther has a clapping for you, but does anyone have questions or comments to ask Faye or mention?
I have a both question and comment. I do think that Professor Faye give us a very important hot topic. STEM education is fundamental preparing our students for the future job market. So this is very important. From my academic background, I'm curious about the main pedagogical approaches you observed in the application of mobile games for STEM education. So what are the pedagogical approaches you observed the teachers used in the application way? Thank you.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure how many I can remember. Then there are definitely different ways, but one thing that is very popular is having students use their mobile phone to collect some information somewhere outside the classroom, and then they come back and use the information to answer a scientific question, so that students can collectively use their mobile, the information they collected, as well as they, at the same time, they collaborate with each other and communicate with each other to, so that they work together to solve the scientific question that are previously posed by the teacher. So that is very popular use of mobile game-based learning. And this whole lesson will be embedded within a narrative story. So students is actually on an adventure to do this, and then finally solve the problem, and they actually achieve the accomplish the task that is posed by the originally posed by the teacher or by someone in the narration. And there are some other uses I can't remember clearly, but as I said, for some of them it may just for collaboration purposes. So students using mobile phone to collaborate with each other on research project, and it doesn't contain. So if you look at the section where I talk about different mobile features that adopted and to create the research study, you'll be able to see sometimes they use the portability, right? This is the most used, and sometimes context sensitivity. This is where they go outside and collect data. And individuality, sometimes they also individualize the learning path for each student using the mobile phone. So based on your answer to specific questions, they may pose different challenge in the game, so that student can be engaged in different way based their own prior knowledge and their own skill level.
So Faye, given what you've said here, have you thought about writing a book for teachers, undergraduate or some other kind of book, or maybe working with Tian to co-write a book? Have you thought about it at all?
I never thought about it. Now you mentioned that, I start to think about it.
I think you should. I think you've got, you've been around, this is a long enough. You've been, at this for about 15 years and, now it's time to kind of take it the next step. So my second question before we move to Emmanuel, is, maybe Jill and Alicia want to know what undergraduate university do you go to in China? Where are you from?
Oh, I'm from Nanjing 理工大学. And that's what how do I Nanjing University of Science and Technology.
Oh, right.
And then I got my
That's where all the
master in
smart people live,
Southeastern.
right?
I'm sorry.
That's where all the smart people live, I heard.
I quite agree with you, Dr. Bang.
But I heard it's kind of
He is very
boring there
smart.
because everyone studies so hard.
We did have fun. So we are probably exceptions there.
So tell people where that is who don't know China on the map of China all that well compared to, is it near Beijing?
Near Shanghai.
Near Shanghai, right.
Mhm.
We are near.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nearer to my city.
Yeah.
Only 1 hour.
That's
Ah.
right.
Okay.
We are
So,
neighbors.
Yeah. So we'll
Dr.
organize an event in that area and get everyone to come to China.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
someday.
that would be really nice.
So someone has a question. I know Emmanuel does, and someone just tried asking one. So we'll go
Yeah,
with Emmanuel first. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, Professor Faye, thank you very much for your presentation.
Sure.
And then I really like your presentation. Game-based learning and then gamification have been one of my best interests ever since I joined the doctorate program. I'm actually a first-year student in science education here. So one of my interests is to actually look at how gamification can be used to enhance student learning in general. So I'm actually trying to write a proposal on this topic and start working on something like that. But one thing I want to ask is about during your review, have you come across how the integration of this mobile-based game into the curriculum in a way that it will not distract learning? Have you come across something like that?
Based on the researchers, they did not distract learning. They actually facilitated learning. But I would say sometimes the same content, it'll take a longer time. Game-based learning, it actually takes time to develop it. This is the first thing. And then even if it integrated into the curriculum, it actually takes a longer time for students to really get engaged in the project and find out their learning paths and eventually learn what they are expected to learn. But I think they do not, very few studies actually measure the delayed retention. I think it may have better effect on delayed retention, although if you measure because students actually experienced it, so they may have better memory of what they have learned.
Okay. Yeah, that's so nice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure,
Good
yeah.
Good to know your science ed and your interest in gamification. I'll try and bring someone else in, Emmanuel, for you in the coming weeks.
Oh, okay, okay.
Someone else has a question before Faye goes? If not, I want to say thank you to Faye here and give her a round of applause and wave.
Thank you. Thank you, Kurt, for inviting me. It has been fun for me to be in a class like that.
I can see that you know this topic as well as anybody, and it's a delight to have an expert like you to arrive as the fourth and near final speaker for, I'm the final speaker for tonight. So, it's great to have you with us, and really it is. You know this research well enough that they can contact you later on and say, I have a question, I want to do research on. So Faye, can you just put your email in the chat window for them? I'll share it with them later as well. But if anyone has a question for Faye, you can you can send her it and over to, or go visit her in Bowling Green. It's only,
Yeah.
4 hours away from here, from
It's
Bloomington.
not too
If you're,
far away, actually.
if you're in Bloomington, not all these students are in Bloomington. They're all around the country or around the world, but we
Oh,
have several that are in Bloomington, about, half. So
wow.
again, I want to thank Faye. What I'll do for 10 minutes, I'm going to summarize Vanessa Denon's study in this, and He Jing, who works with her. They worked, I'll summarize Florence Martin's on adaptive learning, and I'll summarize Mena Jew's and Mimi Lee's on MOOCs. So, and I'll let Faye go to dinner. So thank you, Faye, again.
You, Kurt.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's great to have you
Bye.
with us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So let me quickly, I'm not going to do part 2 of last, I was going to finish my lecture from last week, but we won't have time for that. I'll try and do it in another week, or I'll tape it on my own and record it or something. But let me share Vanessa's slides and see if I can find them here. And that's Vanessa there on the right hand. I'm the guy on the left hand side. And right now, for whatever reason, my mouse doesn't want to. It's causing problems. There we go. So that's what I was afraid of. So we want to move the slides up to the first slide. There we go. Okay. Again, Vanessa, Florence, and I worked on 2 special issues. Right now, Vanessa and I are working on a 3rd one on professional development of instructors for online environments in a journal called Internet and Higher Ed. We've just started on that. So Vanessa's study in the special issue with He-Jing Cho, who I mentioned, and Carrie Ward, is Social Media, Teenagers in the School Context, a scoping review of the research in education in related fields. Vanessa's an endowed chair, a named chair, so it's prestigious at Florida State. She's my former student from 20 to 25 years ago. She's the top person I ever presented with, or for a long time. We presented all over the place in the early days of e-learning on how to assess, how to motivate, other aspects of how to moderate in online worlds. I mean, we were doing tons of stuff. So her research problem is that educational research on social media is kind of limited in scope. And so she wanted to look at the research and find out a little bit more about what's happening out there, what aspects of social media are being investigated, what research disciplines, who's talking about things. And they did a scoping review again, and looked at so many, records, 1,000 records, and narrowed it down to 300 different records by looking at Web of Science and other things. And you can look at the trajectory of the studies that was found, whether they're school-based or school setting in empirical studies or other kinds of relevant research. You can see it's increasing no matter what, from 2009 to 2018, whatever way, slicing the way they want to look at it. And it's getting published mostly in educational research kinds of journals, as public health, business, communication. Those are the primary areas. Mostly in North America, about half in North America, about 22% in Europe and other parts of the world. Mostly quantitative kinds of research, like what Faye was mentioning earlier, and the quantitative is mostly survey kinds of research, because that's easy data to collect. And, I developed a survey tool to collect data. It was so easy. Not as much qualitative, about 1/3 of it, and it's mostly interviews then, and so forth. And then in terms of, the levels, what education levels are looked at in particular, not as much the younger people, only 8%. But as students get older, you can see that it grows into middle school and high school to 51% and so forth. In terms of the education topics, not so much social issues or activism, not so much identity, but more so teaching and learning with technology, more so adoption of technology and literacy with technology. And the aspects of the topics within that are negative behaviors and health issues and in developmental issues and that kind of thing. So the big takeaways she said here, bullet points, I'm just going to read them. Limited work done across disciplinary lines. So typically focused mostly on one discipline. Social media is approached as a discrete phenomenon in a single context. So again, instead of looking at interdisciplinary kinds of research or cross-disciplinary kinds of research, there are many opportunities for connecting disciplines like healthcare and mental health and education, or like literacy and healthcare or identity. So maybe doing bigger, broader kinds of studies or cross-disciplinary. Whoops, I hit the button too hard here. Kinds of research, and consider, conducting studies that might bridge disciplines, as she says here. And so that's kind of the first study. I told you real quickly. I just want to tell you a little bit about it to get you interested in reading the study. Vanessa will be with us next week. I think Hei Jin will be with us next week. And I think Mena Ju, who is the author of this study, was my advisee. Anissa Sari was my advisee. Mimi Lee was my colleague. The three of them worked on the study. I helped them with it, so I know this data very, very, very well. They did 3 systematic reviews of the research on MOOCs, 1 on MOOCs and learning analytics. All of them are well cited. People were doing tons of research on massive open online classes, or MOOCs, and open education. And so as Mena was my student, I said, this would be a great topic to do a systematic review of the research. Mima was looking for someone to work with. She's at Houston, and so I connected them together. Anissa Sari went back home to Indonesia after finishing her dissertation back in July. Mena finished hers 4.5 years ago and is going up for tenure. She'll be joining us next week. And so, I know they've worked really hard on this. Mena's probably gotten a dozen or 2 dozen studies on MOOCs. We've collected a database of 3,000 MOOC instructor names and have studied MOOC engagement, instructional design, cultural sensitivity, personalization, all sorts of stuff. First purpose of this study was to do a comprehensive review of what topics are being looked at, what trends are happening, what research methods are being used in the area of MOOCs, in particular over the past 10 years. MOOCs have only existed since 2008 or 9. So when this study was published 2020, it only had 10 years of research, and not even that. The first couple of years, there wasn't much at all. So what research methods were being used, what countries were leading the way, where were the researchers geographically? So they found 477 studies that were published between 2009 and 2019 that were comparable. So they looked at phase 1, 2009 to 2016, phase 2, 2017 to 2019, and then analyzed the data between phase 1 and phase 2 to look if there were any shifts or changes. And they looked at whether the research was focused more on students or instructors or design or the context thereof. And they looked at the locations of all the MOOC first authors in the different studies. They looked at the first author, where he or she was from. The researchers calculated the countries of the MOOC being studied, and if those didn't specify, they called them global kinds of studies. They were published mostly in the top journals again. IRODL, International Review of Research on Open and Distance Learning, is Open Access, and SSCI. Computers in Ed is a top journal, 45 studies in that one of the 477. So typically, if you're doing MOOC research, 76 were in IRODL, 45 were in Computers in Ed, 25 were in the British Journal. Now, hard journal, the British Journal. All these are the popular journals in the field. And if you break them out into phase 1 and phase 2, you can see a change or a shift that's happening in phase 2 of the research. More people are using Computers in Education and British Journal and so forth and so on. Maybe that's not important to you, but to me, it was kind of indicative of where I should be submitting my research. And in terms of research methods, as you can see out here, most people used empirical research methods, quantitative or mixed method kinds of studies. And that shifted between phase 1 and phase 2. I noticed quantitative is spelled wrong in the middle there, but a shifting was happening to using more quantitative or mixed methods kinds of studies. That was kind of interesting. And survey research, again, it's easy. Platform data, that's computer log data. That's easy. Interview, fairly easy. Observational is hard, so there's not as many observational. Focus groups, kind of hard. It's not that hard, but there's not that much focus groups. And then mostly are descriptive. Descriptives, just the basic mean, medium, and mode survey data. They're not looking at themes, they're not looking at social network analysis, not looking at discourse analysis. It's Simple surveys done of students, quick studies, one day, as Faye said, one day studies, and you get it published. Mostly are student focused. So we noticed that people are not looking at MOOC instructors. So we collected 3,000 MOOC instructor emails to do a dozen studies of MOOC instructors. Not many are looking at the context or the design. So here you can see the shift that is happening between the first phase, 2009, and the second phase. So there's an increase in looking at instructional design. There's an increase in looking at retention. There's an increase in looking at engagement. There's an increase in looking at self-regulated learning. Big increase in looking at communication and professional development. So you can see the changes over time. In terms of focus, you can see the differences between the early studies, or here we've got mixed methods, qualitative and quantitative. The instructor focus are mostly qualitative. The student focus are mostly quantitative. That's a big thing. You know, Alicia's a wow, look at that big numbers there. Design focus were mostly quantitative, you see. But the instructor, you see in yellow, that's qualitative. It's mixed methods. It's qualitative and quantitative. And mostly US, although number 2 is China. You can see here, there are a lot of moves happening in China. So geographically, and the UK and Spain. Now, the reason in Spain, a lot of people were unemployed when MOOCs were happening in Spain, and they were taking MOOCs to get upskilled and reskilled. A lot of youth in Spain, in Barcelona, in particular in parts of Spain, were taking MOOCs and were getting new jobs. They needed to, because there was a huge unemployment. Now today there's a huge unemployment in China. Maybe now in China they want to take MOOCs because they get new skills and so forth. But that was a big issue. The UK maybe too has an unemployment issue as well. Not so much in Canada maybe, or Germany and so forth. Number of authors in the study. Most are big studies with 4 or more authors, co-authors. You know, the majority of the study, 228, is with 4 authors. That's typically my research. I have 4 or more. And collaboration in one, most are just one institution, not cross-cultural, not cross-institutional. Usually just with your own institution. But sometimes some have no collaborators. 67 had no collaborators. In terms of geographically distributed, you can see here, quantitative research. Look at China. 71% in China was quantitative. US was 47. Spain was 54. UK was 32. UK, the majority was qualitative. China, the majority is quantitative. You can see a big stats emphasis in math, and you know, it's the East Asia focus on math and numbers and all that. I'm interpreting here, my bias here. But you know, you can see a shift happening towards more qualitative kinds of things. That was a huge number. Australia's kind of evenly split across everything. Countries of MOOC delivery being studied. Again, it's China and US, UK, Spain. So conclusion, quantitative methods increased in phase 2. I would have expected qualitative to increase, but it was quantitative. Getting platform data, getting, you know, the learning analytics kinds of things. So they did a follow-up study to 2022 that is in the next special issue. They did a follow-up study that, it might be 2023, they did a follow-up looking at learning analytics studies with MOOCs that's just published. So they've done 3 studies, the same team. MOOC research to date is focused on learner issues, not so much instructor issues. So there's a gap. And that's why Maina and I have been focusing on the instructor side for our research. And Anissa studied Malaysia and Indonesian MOOCs, so that's where she's from. So we did a study there. We're now looking at South America. We just did a study in South America MOOCs, looking at MOOC instructors and interviewing them. So you know, we've done a study in Nepal recently, interviewing kids in Nepal who are learning English during the pandemic and many other things. So we've just got that published as well. So tons of MOOC research. I'll try and summarize several studies. Maybe I'll get several people on my team to come back and present with me on self-directed learning from MOOCs research. I hadn't thought of that, but I definitely should. Given the growth of MOOCs in the past few years, people are looking at money, how they're going to make money off of MOOCs, and how they can maintain them and sustain them and upgrade them. So, you know, other researchers like George Valencianos, who will be a guest in 2 weeks, They've suggest we need more comprehensive research. We need more qualitative research. We need to look at other methodologies. And we can ask George Valencianos about that and about his studies of MOOCs. Because if you come that night, you don't have to. It's my other class, but you know. So that's the second study. Again, I'm trying to quickly go through 3 more studies. So you get 4 studies from the experts and 3 additionals. You'll have 7 of the studies that we did, or 13 or so. So Florence Meyer is the last one I'm going to quickly talk about because I don't know this one as well. She looked at adaptive learning researchers, maybe the most important study in some ways, with Rob Moore, who's now at the University of Florida, who was at Old Dominion, with Jan Chen, who's at New Mexico, and Carl Westin at North Carolina, Charlotte. And learning analytics, definition here, emerging learning technology is dynamically adjusted to dynamically adjust the content to provide more interactive and more personalized experiences and activities for students to facilitate their learning. We want to have technology respond to the student needs. We want the technology to detect what the student needs. We want the student not only to detect, but create avenues, pathways, and prompt them through them so they can move through the content according to their background, according to their familiarity, according maybe their learning styles, maybe it's their intelligence, maybe it's their preferences, whatever you want to call it. So Florence looked at, here are all the studies that summarize the research on learning analytics. And some looked at personal traits, some looked at learning styles, some looked at individual differences. And those are the studies that are there. And there's the framework or the model that they utilized in this study. So there's a learner model, there's a content model, there's an instructional model, and there's an outcome. So this is a kind of creating an artificial intelligence system or platform to map the learner skills, basically, or what the learner model tells you what the learners know, what their preferences are, so as to create the activities that best help them get through those material. So learner model is known as the student model, refers to the learning characteristics, what the student knows and doesn't know. Content models refers to the domain model, refers to the content or knowledge base of the course. What are you trying to teach? The learner model is who's in the course. The instructional model is the pedagogy that you're providing within that system that adapts to the learner and their needs upon request or as they deem it needed, and so forth. Then there's 3 other terms here: adaptive engine, adaptive target, and adaptive source. Adaptive engine can be described as the AI sequence generator. It provides a learner map and it decides the content to be delivered to the learner when they need it. The adaptive target refers to the characteristics that to what it will be adapted to, the characteristics of the learners in effect here, and the instructional content and that's going to be adapted for them. The adaptive source, the learner model is referred to as it's the content model and the instructional design model together are called the, I think we'll just skip that one. I don't know that one. Okay. So the purpose of the study, in this review, we will emphasize the instructional model along with the content model for adapting instructional content. Specifically, they examine the adaptive strategy used for the instruction. So again, they want to know what's being published, where it's being published, the context of the adaptive learning, the outcomes, what data is being collected, what research methods, what's the focus, what kind of strategies are being used to adapt the content, and what technologies are being used to adapt the content. That's 6 questions. That's probably too many questions, but that's what they had here. And again, so they looked at certain resources out there that were publishing in the adaptive learning spaces. They identified the literature. They reviewed the articles from 2009 to 2018. They excluded book chapters, no technical reports, no dissertations, no proceedings. They mostly focused on peer-reviewed journals. Okay, so that was primarily focused on adaptive learning for instruction. There was identifiable methods describing how that study was conducted, and the findings, quantitative and qualitative, were included. Mostly English-based, not Chinese, not Korean, not Malay, mostly English journals. So here you got a database of 262. They eliminate duplicates, and they come down to 61 comparable articles that fit their purpose and scope. They exclude things that were not done validly, that maybe don't have research data reported or whatever. They had multiple coders. They had certain thematic analysis of particular studies. They had coding categories that they were looking at within this. You can see the frequency of adaptive learning increased from 2010 to 2018. It doubled. It's still not a lot, but it doubled. They were publishing in the top journals again. Computers and Ed, top journal in the field. It's very hard to get published in there. They always reject me, always. I've never had a publication in there. I've got 160 journal articles, not a single one in Computers and Ed. I got 400 articles, nothing in Computers and Ed. Now, Ed Tech and Society, I got several, and British Journal and so forth. But that first one, it's really hard. Mostly, see, Jill, they're Taiwanese. You see, the Taiwanese are told if you publish in Computers and Ed, you can get tenure. You can get a distinguished professor rank. In Korea, you can get $5,000 bonus from publishing in there. Seriously, $5,000 bonus. And so they're in East Asia, China, Japan, not so much, but China, Japan, Taiwan, and Korea. They're all focusing on social science citation index because it'll get them money, tenure, distinguished professor title. In Singapore, you cannot get tenure with one SSCI article. Now there's Chinese SSCI, CSSCI. But in Singapore, you need like a dozen or 15 of them. That's very competitive in Singapore. And Hong Kong might be the same. It's very competitive in Singapore. It's stressful. I've had a few students go there. They don't last too long. They burn through them like being, I was in a CPA firm, accounting. They burn through people like consulting companies, man. It's crazy stuff. It's all craziness. And they punch clocks in Singapore. You actually have to punch the clock. I haven't had to do that since I worked in a factory a long time ago. Singapore, the faculty, professors have to punch a clock. Don't go there. Now, a lot of my friends are there. This is being recorded. I love Singapore. I love Singapore a lot. Oh, don't, you know. But it's true. You know, people they burn out very fast, very fast. It's prestigious to go to Singapore. It's a lovely country. It's small. You can get around anywhere you want to go. But don't become a professor there if you can avoid it. Go somewhere else, man. Unless you want to go for a few years, you know, and have some fun for a couple of years. But don't plan your whole life. You'll get gray hair real fast, and you just don't want to do that. So instructional context and subjects. So you can see government, not so much. Higher ed, 41. K-12, 16. So it's higher ed, K-12. That's where the money is. Studies were done in weeks. These are week-long. Now, I just had a student do a study on this in North Carolina. He looked at stat courses, I believe. It might have been chemistry. He looked at stat and chemistry courses and just published his dissertation on this. And his name's John Felci. And I could bring John in. Maybe I should. I should have John come in and talk about his dissertation. That'd be great. Let me talk to John and see. It's AI-based. They just created this AI system platform called Realize It. And yeah, I'll talk to John. So computer science studies, sciences, business, that kind of thing. You see this, again, like Byron's study, cognitive and affective top things. Cognitive, affective, and behavior, time spent. So time spent, attitude, achievement. Experimental design studies, majority. Mixed method, number 2. Survey data, email, discussion data, and test data, primarily. Not interview, not observations, not log. So this slide is really, I think it's a cool slide. And this slide is a very cool slide. Jill's shaking her head, yes. This is where Jill's getting, yeah, this is, I'm finding a lot of stuff. This is good. So outcome variables. So this is what we're looking at. We're looking at experimental designs with tests and surveys and discussion forums. And then the number of studies here in terms of research focus. Design and development of adaptive, they're designing adaptive learning systems and they're testing, like John Felci's study, or implementing and evaluating. Not so much focused on the learning characteristics or a needs analysis. And so here are the sources for the kinds of things. So adaptive source measuring learning characteristics. We got time spent, 3 studies. Log data, 3 studies. Pre-test, post-test Psychological tests, 8 studies. Learning styles, cognitive styles, 8 studies, 14 studies. So that, you know, more so on cognitive styles than some of these other. So here we've got adaptive targets. What was the adapted? What was the target? Well, feedback, we might be adapting the feedback based on the learners. We might be adapting the pace of delivery. We might be adapting the sequence of the learning. We might be adapting the course topic or the content. So most of them were adapting the content, changing the content for the learners and seeing which kind of content's better, or adapting the feedback. If you give genuine feedback, or you give very specific feedback, or you give general feedback, they're comparing that and they're seeing which is the kind of adaptive forms of feedback helps the learner the most, right? So that's why they study feedback. They might be changing the learning sequence around in some way, right? So this is a really important slide as well. And so here's the categorization of the adaptive technologies that are being used. So is it an adaptive grading system? Is it an adaptive mentoring platform? Is it an adaptive gaming system? Is it an adaptive language learning kind of system, multimedia? Is it an adaptive questionnaire or survey? So these are the kinds of studies that were being conducted here. I won't read through all of that. And they had implications for instructional designers, researchers, and so forth. And again, that's the special issue that this thing appears in. And so I'm back to Tien's study here. So these slides will be posted for all of you to take a look at. I've gone through in the last 20 minutes 3 studies. We've spent well over 2 hours going through 7 studies tonight. That's the most, I promise that's the most we'll do all semester, I think. Thank you for hanging in there tonight for a longer period than you planned, I planned, and so forth. Next week, we go to this next special issue. I'll explain that in an email to all of you. It'll be Mondays, back to Mondays at 6 o'clock, I think. Comments or questions from anyone? Is your brain tired? My brain hurts. I had to present 3 of them. My brain should be really hurting, you know. So, yeah, East Asia and South, you know, Singapore is not in East Asia. It's in Southeast Asia, but they're crazy people in Southeast Asia and Singapore. Yeah. India too, I think. I don't know. Maybe they lighten up a little bit in India. Other comments? I need some, you're darn right I do. I deserve a beer, not need, just deserve. Or a glass of wine. Any comments? How about 3 words from tonight? If your brain's full, just say my brain's full. Jennifer, 3 words from tonight.
My brain's full. But
okay.
I do have other words, but maybe another time.
Okay, go ahead. Give me 1 or 2 more words.
No, it was helpful. A couple of the last speakers, when they started talking about confounding variables and what was the other sort of related idea? Just other influences, because that's the thing that's giving me difficulty reading the systematic reviews, because I stop and I have questions that are more focused on the data in the individual studies that I'm not going to see. And so this is to me, I'm not reading, I've not read this kind of study before, so I'm adjusting. So I enjoyed some of those comments, but my brain is full.
Yeah, not till week 4. We'll get to the individual kinds of studies in week 4. So hang on. And also, you notice I use a 2+2 method for assignments. In my other class on Tuesday nights, I'm using a 1-1-1-1-1. So we have 6 studies, all due different weeks. So it's a dissertation preps to run a little differently. I just noticed it myself. I got an assignment due next week. So just so you know, Jennifer, when it comes time to dissertation, you're not in the, are you in the you're in the master's program, right?
Master's.
Yeah. Someday you'll be in the, so 3 words, Esther.
I am trying to work on a systematic review of what some of the work that I'm doing in my area. And I was doing that the whole of the winter break, just trying to see how a systematic review is done.
What's your area?
I like the presentations. They've helped to open up my mind on what I have to do, even the difference between a meta-analysis and a systematic review. So I've been paying attention mostly to those small bits. What are you supposed to include? How do you run that? And how would your findings be like? So it's been very helpful.
Are you in Bloomington?
Yes, I am in Bloomington.
Okay, okay. What are you doing a systematic review on?
I am doing a systematic review on pedagogical content knowledge in physics.
Okay. Are you a science major?
I am in science ed.
Great. Good to have you here.
Yes.
So 3 words, MJ.
More longitudinal studies.
More longitudinal studies. Well said. That's definitely, and yeah, I've tried, but it's a very important point. Anyone else have 3 words? 2 more people. We'll wrap it up for tonight. 2 more 3-word people. No? Alicia, you got 3 words?
Amazing, significant, and fantastic. This is what I think of this lecture.
Well, okay. So, Risa, you have 3 words?
Maybe more than 3 words. I just wonder, when you were talking about MOOC, mass open online courses, most likely when we talk about MOOC, the lecturer is human. Am I right?
Not so much anymore. It was to start with. Now, increasingly, they're not human. They're putting a canned up there. They're normal. It's self-paced. It's becoming all of them are moving to self-paced.
When you were talking about MOOC, I wonder, most likely the MOOC is going to reach to its saturation point. Maybe
Yeah.
AI affects everything.
Yeah, maybe it does. Or AI already did with MOOCs because it has Stanford built tests within there.
Yes,
all that,
when you
so-
were talking about MOOC, I was just thinking about AI and MOOC. I was comparing them to each other.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that. This class was dominated by MOOC research the past few times. I'm not going to do that this time, but I will have some. Is that Xiaoying with us tonight, Xiaoying?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I think I'm new here, and this field is new to me. I think tonight's class provides me profound, abundant professional materials. I think it's amazing.
Now, we have a Xiaoying Zhang in our program. Are you a second Xiaoying Zhang?
I'm sorry. Maybe I heard it wrong. Sorry. I'm I Yan Zheng.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm missing the first name. I don't only see the last name. So type your full name in the chat for me so I get that, and put your email in so I have your email for that would be great. So I want to invite anyone who wants to come on Friday. I am going to present my first lecture in the School of Education in 4 years since COVID. I'm going to be talking about writing and publishing and for my dissertation prep class, but I'll send a formal invite in email. But if anyone's in Bloomington, afterwards, we're going to Mother Bear's for pizza. Anyone's invited, anyone's welcome. Class starts at 1:15. I probably won't start my lecture till 1:30-ish or a little after that, so you don't have to come right at 1:15. But anyways, I'll see my visiting scholars Friday and anyone else who wants to pop in room 2271, I believe. Yeah, it's right across from the old IST office on the 2nd floor. Anyways, thank you all for coming tonight. I am going to stop the recording here. It is the end, finally, for some people. It's the end of week 2. R678 Emerging Learning Technologies, spring of 2024, going to the cloud.